He says that you can see saucers on the ground. He says there is a kind of cone, a large cone, and larger vehicles come and land on top of the cone with the top of the cone fitting into a hole in the bottom. There is an elevator inside of the cone, and that goes down into the mountain or ground about 1 kilometer. You can see the aliens running around the base getting into the vehicles and stuff. They use small vehicles to get around that have no wheels. They are rectangular in shape and they levitate. They do not show up in color because they are highly reflective, but in B and W they are visible. He says that there are beam weapons that are floating in strategic locations, and there is a road into the base. He obtained infrared photos of the area from an altitude of 14,000 feet. There is a level highway going into the area that is 36 feet wide. It is a government road that is part of the off-limits road that goes through Colorado's Ute Reservation and then south across the border. Branton. One can see telemetry trailers and buildings that are 5-sided buildings with a dome. It is standard military procedure. There are many guard points and stakes, and there are launch domes that one can see. Next to the launch dome he saw a black limousine and another AT some distance off, apparently. The careful measurements showed that the limousine was the same length of his Lincoln Town car. It is a CIA vehicle. Also there was a blue van. He has been cautioned about these limousines as they will run you off the road if you try to get into the area, and in fact somebody has been killed in that manner. To the north is a launch site. There are 2 wrecked ships there. They are 36 feet with wings, and one can see oxygen and hydrogen tanks. There are 4 cylindrical objects Socorro type, 2 carrying something while flying. The whole operation is based upon a government agreement and a technology trade. We get out of it atomic ships that are operated by plutonium. The Cash Landrum case was one of them. The doors jammed open and neutron radiation came out. They are based at Kirtland Afban Holloman Afb no, only know of one based at Hafb and someplace in Texas, possibly Fort Hood, Texas, a guess only. He said the government is paying the hospital bills for the Cash Landrum victims. Cosi input, found out later unless someone covering, not true. Refueling of the plutonium is accomplished at Los Alamos. He had pictures of this base back to 1948 and it has been there starting in 1948. Pictures in 1962, you can see many saucers and the base and truck. The road was passed off to the local inhabitants as a lumber contract. He has photographs, I believe, of the firing of a beam weapon that fires in 2 directions. That would be necessary on a flying saucer. The reaction forces would impede the vehicle. He has computed the speeds of the flying saucers at 15,000 miles per hour and indicates that the pilots, of ours, are from NSA, the National Security Agency. The aliens have had atomic propulsion system for 48 years, or rather one particular alien group, probably native subterranean. Branton and the saucers themselves operate on an electric charge basis having to do with crystal semiconductor and, maybe a superlattice. I think he said as you increase the voltage, the current goes down. At present there are 6 to 8 vehicles, maybe up to 10 over the area and sometimes up to 100. They can be seen in the clouds. They go into cumulus clouds and produce nitrogen nitride. I assume or speculate it is this. You will see black spots in the cloud. They eat holes in the cloud. If you can see black spots in a cloud, then you can tell that a vehicle is in there. He says that they come from 6 different cultures and in his communications via accessing the information system of the underground base by tapping into their ship-to-base communications frequency using a radio computer video setup he developed. Branton, he learned that some come from a binary system, possibly Zeta Reticuli, and from distances up to and larger than 32 light-years away. They also, appear to have 1 to 3 carrier ships in Earth orbit at 50,000 kilometers altitude, based upon data. He had to form the words to try to communicate and he produced a vocabulary of 627 words in a matrix form and used a computer. The flying saucers, we see, are limited to operation in the atmosphere. Now with regard to the cattle problem, the aliens are using the DNA from cattle and are making humanoids. He got pictures of their video screen. Some of the creatures are animal-like, some are near human and some are human and short with large head. Hybrids. It would seem that if this is the case, not all of the so-called hybrids are infused with reptilian DNA, but rather cattle DNA or a wide variety of other DNA sources available in the Nightmare Hall level of the base. Branton. They grow the embryos. After the embryos become active by a year of training presumably that is required for them to become operational. When they die, they go back into the tank. Their parts are recovered. In 1979 something happened and the base was closed. There was an argument over weapons and our people were chased out, more than 100 people involved. Someplace later he indicates further details on this point. This may be where the 66-44 figures come from, that is 100 special forces who were sent in and forced to face literally thousands of Greys, 66 of whom fought to their deaths while 44 out of the 100 managed to escape back to the surface. Branton, the base is 4,000 feet long and our helicopters are going in there all the time. When it became known that he was familiar with all this, the mutilation stopped. True, they are taking humanoid embryos out of this base to somewhere else. I asked if it was Albuquerque or Los Alamos, but he said he didn't know. January 8, 1986, looks like it is Albuquerque. Note, subterranean bases below Albuquerque? Thomas E. Costello also stated that much of the Dulce activity was being extended into a major gray basing area below the Los Alamos region. One team of scientists who were investigating some newly found ancient pictographs that depicted alien-like scenes in or around the Santa Fe National Forest, insisted that they had seen in the early morning hours while camping in the area several dozen discs in the skies over the mountains, and shortly afterward a very large caravan of cattle trucks, which entered the area and seemed to leave hours later, after unloading their cargo. This whole situation seems to imply that the secret government may be feeding the Greys at Los Alamos, which is apparently the largest nest in North America outside of other known nests near Madigan, Fort Lewis, Washington, Lake Port Hopeland, Mount Lassen and Deep Springs, California, Area 51, Nevada, Dugway, Utah and the major nexus below Dulce, New Mexico. This may all be part of an elaborate operation to appease the aliens. The scientists stated that black helicopters, apparently having spotted their vehicles some distance away, flew over the area for some time in an effort to locate them, but apparently could not do so. They said that an almost identical scenario was repeated the following night and early in the morning. Branton, he said there are still quite a few helicopters in operation. They fly at night. Oscar unmarked, he went up there himself in a helicopter and the O's. I briefed the copter pilot and he thought perhaps the copter pilot himself was an undercover man. They saw helicopter pads up there, Vietnam type, with bearing markers and trees pushed off away from the location. It is such a wild area, he said. He agreed to send me the coordinates of this base. Regarding abductions of people, they pick out medium to low EQ personnel. Note, they have also, according to my information, attempted to abduct people with higher than normal EQs, with photographic memory, etc., in order to either utilize them on an unconscious basis or neutralize their intellectual capabilities if they appear to be a potential threat. Branton, they are able to scope out each one, so we can do the same thing with electromagnetic spectrum analyzers. I don't know this part, word mix-up, drop. They pick up these people and then put implants into them and then take tissue samples, including ovum from the women, sperm from the men and DNA. They can program these people as slaves to do whatever they wish and they will have no memory of it. They, the hardcore type, staunchly refuse to be X-rayed or hypnotically regressed. You can recognize them because of their eyes. He says peculiar look in the eyes and a funny smile. Oscar-esque expression. Hynek, that is the late J. Allen Hynek, who worked for the Air Force's Project Blue Book in the early years and later became a civilian pathologist. Branton knows about all of this and has been in contact with Carl Lorenzen. He regards Hynek as a threat. Oscar-esque not really, I just think he is still a governor cover. At his house, he showed Hynek films and out in the backyard a flying saucer. He asked Hynek about his view with regard to abductions as to how many people might have been abducted. Hynek unhesitatingly said about 1 out of 40. Note, other sources claim that more recent figures indicate this to be 1 out of 20 or even 1 out of 10 Americans, since more abductees are being taken and implanted as time goes on, most of whom are consciously unaware of the process because of hypnoelectrochemical memory suppression. Branton, he said that many people come to his door to see him, just out of the blue, and he sees scars on the back of their necks. That previous old scars are easy to detect and that new ones are hard to detect. He feels that this is a sickening situation. The aliens have gone wild and use hypodermics and notes a parallel 4 times. McCampbell, I don't know what that means. Oscar-esque I don't know either. He has been paralyzed 4 times and has been hit 250 times by hypodermics. He says they knock you cold and they do whatever they want to do, and the above points have been verified medically. A man came to see him with a top-secret document that was dated in the 50s, indicating if anybody found out about all of this they would kill them. He was asked, "Doesn't that bother you?" He said no, it didn't. He said he had sent some film to Kodak and there were 7 rolls. They were Ektachrome G, which could not be processed locally, so they had to go to Kodak. He does all of the film work commercially so that nobody could claim that he had monkeyed with the film. His films came back, but one was plain Ektachrome, but Asterisk was missing for 2 months. When received, 9 feet was missing, and this was close-ups of UFOs that he had taken. The missing pictures of the 9 feet, asterisk the 9 feet didn't, others known only to meet it in a top-secret document that he studied, and the code name is Aquarius, and IT is a project of the National Security Agency, asterisk I was told NASA. They are the ones that kept his film and copied it with deletions on Ektachrome and sent it back, asterisk I suspect. There have been indirect threats by the Air Force intelligence against him. The location of the base is 2.5 miles northwest of Dulce and almost overlooks the town. IT is up on the mesa. We discuss the similarity between everything we have been talking about here and the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He said he speculated that seemed to be a plan of disclosure, that is the movie. The coordinates of the location are not far off, and the mountain where the actual base is looks much like the mountain in the movie. The next thing was discussing the trade-off. Alright. Here is what we got in the trade-off. We got atomic technology, the atomic flying ships. Several of them, the first one wrecked on the ground and it can be seen and photographed from the air. A second one wrecked. A third one was wrecked. Apparently this last one was repaired and was the one that was in Houston, near Houston in the Cash Landrum case. The second items that we get out of it are the beam weapons, the beam technology, and third, asterisk I speculate, is the thought sonic beam. That is the means by which communication is accomplished. It is electrostatic in character with a magnetic component, asterisk artifact, and it is the only way of communicating with people. They have to have the implants in order to use it. The crash occurred at the base when there was a disturbance of some sort. The aliens killed 66 of our people and 44 got away. Asterisk alien computer input, true. I do not know. Over an argument, they turned on us. He was familiar with what the aliens called MPS, which means manipulations per second, no, manipulations per sequence. An electrostatic field that can be manipulated into many configurations and the craft can stall. In order to prevent this, the field is adjusted once every 40 milliseconds. He studied the trails from UFOs and they seem to break down into a pulse rate of 62 per second. Based upon the color movie pictures, there seems to be a blast of light and spectral components and composition in there, with a bow wave in front of the UFO with nitrogen showing green and oxygen showing blue, but with the saucer being invisible. They can run into a car or airplane and this bow wave will destroy them. Rockets can hit this bow wave and be destroyed. They can't penetrate it. At White Sands he was shown pictures of an F-15 shooting rockets with a missile at a target, and the saucers came in behind the missile, 30 feet behind, and then flew through the explosion. He didn't know what the purpose of the demonstration was, but suspected it might be just to show how invulnerable they are. But sometimes the saucers get into trouble and they are all consumed in some kind of way. When he went up to Dulce in a helicopter, they landed and left some equipment there, but then when they came back the pilot was extremely nervous. Paul wanted to land on the base, but the pilot wouldn't do that. They came back to Dulce and landed at a small strip there, where they found 2 large Huey helicopters. The Indian asterisk highway patrolman in charge there named Valdez went aboard one of the choppers and they found them to be full of commandos. They estimated a total of 75 commandos, fully armed with M1 rifles, asterisk no, M16s and rockets, asterisk ampersand launchers. They did not have any indication of rank, asterisk Valdez says no, not true, my mistake, I did not get that all. They only had shoulder patches on and the helicopters had no identification other than numbers. The helicopters were part of a project called Blue Light and they were from Fort Carson, Colorado, asterisk OS input. When they left they were escorted by these 2 large Huey helicopters. As they were flying along, in the background they saw rise up one of the advanced space technology vehicles that looked like a manta ray with a negative dihedral and projections coming down. It flew vertically past the 2 accompanying helicopters. Paul feels that it is imperative that this information be released because he feels that it is unconstitutional for the government to be involved in such an arrangement that invades the privacy of the individuals by the implantations. He said that once they have been tampered with by the aliens, they are never the same. I suppose one can easily believe that. Jim McCampbell comments, so it appears that, for the privilege of collecting the biological materials in the mutilation of cattle and the abductions and the operations on board the craft, the government has allowed this to go on, and even to assist for the privilege of getting the nuclear flight technology, plus also the embryos which are flown out of the base. A rather fantastic story. Jim McCampbell comment, Paul strikes me as being an extremely conservative, extremely knowledgeable and reliable scientist, who is intimately familiar with sophisticated laboratory equipment. His is thoroughly scientific and reliable. Jim McCampbell evaluation. I inquired about the other bases that were referred to in the Stigmata report or article. He said all that he knew was that one was to the south, one to the west and one to the east, and he doesn't want to know anything more about it. Note, that is, in addition to the base north of town, there were other connected facilities west, south and east of town. In fact, some sources have claimed that level 1 of the Dulce base reaches under the town of Dulce itself at a depth of some 200 to 300 feet. Branton, I discussed the prospect of using the paper in the Muffin proceedings to try to find the center of gravity for the mutilation cases from those maps that run from about 1972 to 1982 or 1983. The word gravity triggered in his mind another connection having to do with the Department of Interior that has a gravity department, and they do in fact survey the United States and publish maps indicating the gravity contours. There is a very weak gravity at the site near Dulce. Note, also another very weak gravity reading exists around Creede, Colorado, which is reportedly a northern extension from the Dulce facility. There are also southeast extensions as far away as Roswell and Carlsbad, New Mexico, and an apparent southwest extension that seems to reach as far as the Superstition MTS, east of Phoenix, Arizona. These extensions are not necessarily all base complexes, but tunnels that have been excavated by aliens, secret government or ancient cultures, or all of the above, via nuclear drills which eliminate waste matter by melting and cracking the rock, and pushing the molten rock as the machine moves forward into the peripheral cracks of the tunnel, where the incandescent rock cools into a super hard glazed and watertight lining. Branton, he said that the craft are very sensitive to the gravity levels, and suggested that perhaps the other sites might also be located relative to weak gravity. He indicated that the objects fly in a wobbly way. His pictures have shown that. He says like the rocking of a boat. He has measured many right-angle turns and also full 180-degree turns in the 20th of a second with the object still inside the bow wave. He has also observed and photographed the object or lights moving in a triangular pattern and square patterns. He says high-powered radar can interfere with them. I reported on the meeting that we had on Sunday afternoon and raised some of the questions that came out of that meeting. One of them was why not remove the implant? He said that this had been discussed and the lady witness finds that acceptable if she can be assured that there can be no nerve damage. He then went into great detail, which exceeds my knowledge of anatomy, in describing the location of the implants. One appears to be adjacent to and external to the cortex, which I think he indicated was the base of the brain. The image of the CAT scan is of a very small helix, like it was joining two major nerves near the spinal column. Then on the lateral right side from the back, there's an implant of perhaps like the one above. Another is on the left side. Two others are on the forward part of the skull, which appear to be small 2mm electrodes against the radial nerve. There is a shape to these things, which he indicated is like a baby bottle nipple upside down. This shape is not the implants, which illegible the skull, not the cap part, but just the nipple itself. I raised the question of the use. Senior satellites seeing the space. He acknowledged that and also that ours can certainly see it. He had a discussion with some photo analyst, who indicated that he had seen tracks up a hill in a launch location that was definitely not a rock but some kind of artificial construction. On the hazard of entering the area, I asked about that. He said that there is a risk if we went in on foot, but if a person tried to do that likely that the people would whack them. I said, zap. The odds are one might be accosted, but he thinks that a helicopter would be safe. But what he wants to do is to do additional aerial surveillance. Then go in with a group, the larger number of people the better. A highway patrolman, a friend of his, is ready to go in at any time. He says one can't act on impulse. You have to plan out a program. He said 4 times he had near encounters and one was with this Major Edwards. He had received a mental communication, *, no, not received. I asked them mentally, they were apparently scanning me. I don't receive anything mentally. While watching some UFOs. He is president of Thunder Scientific Corporation, a well-known operation there, with their specialty being temperature and humidity devices. Their equipment has been on the shuttle and most of their business is with the top 500 corporations. His company is bicentennial on 1/2 acres and he is now building an additional 3,500 square feet building. There is another organization called Benoit's Laboratory, which is the research arm of Thunder Scientific Corporation, owned 90% by the latter and operated by his 3 sons. They have invented a hearing device that has no moving parts that makes totally deaf people able to hear, and in addition, expanding the frequency range, plus 100 Hz on the high side and down to less than 10 Hz on the low frequency end. He said that he got involved in all this merely as a hobby and it became an obsession. He simply wanted to know what was going on and to develop instrumentation to measure data, etc. since the signals from the UFOs are very low frequency, down around 200 Hz, and with an analyzer you just think you are looking at some noise. But I believe he said it was a memory scope that was able to filter out the signals involved there, whereas ordinary filters do not. They trigger signals in an on and off fashion, instead of 0 and 1 volt representing that type of communication or signal. A distinction is made between a narrow pulse and wide pulse. Each communication is preceded by 4 or 5 pulses. He had previously been in touch with the OC, which has been verified by the book Clear Intent. But now he says that when he calls them, they won't speak to him, so he's in a shutout situation. I pointed out that there were 2 OCs, Office of Special Investigation, and the other is CIA, Office of Scientific Investigation. He assured me that his was not the CIA group. He said the actual title of the group that he was dealing with was the Office of Secret Investigation, or Intelligence. He says there is also a new pattern, or illegible, called Human Intelligence. That is, they investigate the humans, that is, the government. I mentioned to him that in Clear Intent that it said he was under surveillance. That happens to be an error. That information comes from somewhere else. But he quickly said, I know that I am under surveillance. They set up a site across the street from his house with computers and recorders. A girl rented the house. He had a detective look into this and found that she was operating under an assumed name and she had no social security number. He has photographs of people coming and going with NRIT license plates. Air Force, F-Weapons Lab. He thinks NSA is orchestrating this. For an entirely separate subject, he thinks **I was told that it was by a Washington source. This whole operation, the UFO-based detail, is classified higher than the president. That is, he thinks the president doesn't know about this. Not in total depth, true. He is also concerned that there are 2 levels of security involved. 1, Project Aquarius, which is top secret, and another, 2, higher than that, where people in charge of the higher level information having these new vehicles could simply take over the government. He called the Air Force Intelligence Headquarters in Washington, yes, true, Intel. He didn't say Washington, but that was the idea. The commanding officer was not present, but he talked to a captain who was the adjutant or executive and started talking. He said, I know all of these facts, and this and that, and what do you think about that? The captain said, just write the United States a report and tell the United States what we should do. About it. So he prepared a 20-page report and Edwards saw it. He forwarded it by Federal Express and also a copy to the White House in a double envelope, indicating that sensitive material was in the inner envelope. Edwards got a call from Colonel Smith, not Smith, Colonel Dunn _____. Have to check files. Who was the White House liaison to inquire who this Benoit's fellow was. Edwards gave a positive report. The White House was extremely interested and issued orders to get on with it, to do something, assuring Edwards that Benoit's would receive a letter within 2 weeks. Note, this tends to confirm that 2 groups, both elected and unelected, are working simultaneously within government, and that each seems to have different agendas in regards to how government should be run, how the alien problem should be dealt with, and how other issues should be handled. Only a small percentage of the White House executive branch, and probably even a smaller percent of the Senate, House of Representatives and Congress know what is going on in regards to the joint interaction projects. The executive branch apparently knows more than the other governmental branches because of its close ties with the military intelligence industrial complex and because of the large number of appointed rather than elected officials operating within. That is, within the executive secret agencies that have been created to operate outside of presidential awareness for purposes of plausible deniability and which have come under the control of the industrial elite rather than the elected Congress. One of the reasons why the Congress and the electorate government has lost so much control over the country to the industrial elite is because they have capitulated this authority over to the president and executive branch of government, when the president according to the United States Constitution should serve merely as the spokesman for the Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives. We have unconstitutionally allowed the president to have the power to appoint his own unelected staff, establish executive orders without the consent of Congress, and create agencies that are free from congressional oversight. For instance, congressional overseers and investigators have been allowed to hold only a top-secret security clearance, whereas many of these secret agencies like MJ-12 that were created by the executive branch are classified above top secret or higher. In other words, they are unelected governments operating like tapeworms within the elected government, with the potential of corrupting it from within, as exemplified by the numerous black projects taking place within the Dulce base and elsewhere. The activities being carried out within the Dulce base have gone out of control, and all manner of unregulated atrocities are being carried out there simply because there is no congressional oversight of those activities. Now that the cloning of large animals such as lambs and monkeys is a publicly known fact, we cannot ignore the many claims of sophisticated and unregulated cybernetic and biogenetic atrocities that have reportedly been taking place within these bases for decades. I should know, since I myself am the product of such cybernetic biogenetic tampering, although you might say a renegade product of such black budget projects, and one who they lost control of, along with whatever sensitive data/secrets my unconscious mind may have harbored at the time of my defection. In regards to the problems threatening our constitutional government, giving the United States President the power to create agencies which can operate with impunity far from the prying eyes of Congress and the citizens of the USA is dangerous in the extreme. This is especially true when we consider the risk that a potential president may be the hireling of powerful corporate interests with strong media ties, and therefore able to bend public opinion in favor of the candidate of their choice while discrediting the opposition. History has shown that powerful corporate entities are more interested in making a profit, even if it means selling out the rest of us, than in maintaining liberty and equality. Many of the corporate empires involved with the secret government hold to the Constitution only to the degree that it serves their own self-interest. This has led America dangerously close to the edge that separates a congressionally run democracy from what we might refer to as a corporate-run monarchy, one that is ultimately controlled by unelected corporate interests rather than by elected members of Congress, the Senate, and House of Representatives. Brenton, such a letter was never received. Finally, Colonel Smith from the Air Force Secretary sent him a letter eventually just pursuing the old party line that said single quote he should not be troubling the headquarters of the Air Force and the executive offices of the White House with all of his stuff. Note, as a result of this and other pressure which came from elsewhere in the intelligence community, nothing immediately came about, and certainly no congressional investigation into the activities near Dulce, which was definitely warranted. The pressure may have come from the NSA, CIA, Aquarius Magi agencies. It seems as if the alleged intelligence agent, pathologist William Moore, played a major role in the efforts to sabotage the Dulce investigations and destroy Paul Benoit's reputation. Moore was working on behalf of the Aviary, a schizophrenic alien intelligence agency operating deep within the murky labyrinthine levels of the governmental military-industrial complex, an agency which is apparently carrying out the policies and agendas of the likewise schizophrenic MJ-12 organization, or the policies of MJ-12's superior agency Magi, the majestic agency for joint intelligence. Depending on which faction has gained the upper hand in MJ-12, in the CIA, and in the Aviary, that is the Navy's pro-American cabal and Com-12 agencies, or the Nazis, I mean the NSA's pro-New World Order Magi and Aquarius agencies. The policies of these agencies have in the past been subject to immediate change, if not absolute reversal. As a case in point, cattle mutilation researcher Linda Moulton Howe was invited to Kirtland, FB in April of 1983 to visit with OFOC agent Richard Doty. During the visit, Doty showed how some extremely sensitive documents proving the existence of aliens and alien hardware now in government hands. Doty detailed a complex plan for metered public release of the entire UFO secret, and was interested in using Miss Howe's contract with HBO to do a UFO/cattle mutilation documentary as a springboard for the release of such information. Elaborate plans were made and many promises were given. However, as a result of a power struggle deep within the intelligence community, the plans for public information release were shelved, and Linda Howe was left out in the cold, scratching her head and wondering just what the hell the whole thing was all about. And Linda Howe has not been the only one to experience this bizarre type of schizophrenic activity within the intelligence community, especially in regards to projects and plans for the government to come clean on the alien agenda. Apparently there are those patriots within government who want all of the facts about alien malevolence and infiltration of planet Earth made public. Those corporate interests who want none of the facts made public as they maintain their power through the suppression of truth. And those agents of the aliens themselves who want information made public so long as the alien greys are presented as benevolent space brothers. I would guess the latter would involve some type of propaganda meant to entice the masses themselves to accept and capitulate their will over to the draconian reptiloid/grey collectivists, who have infiltrated and control certain levels of the military intelligence industrial complex. Branton, Bennewitz showed this letter to Edwards. WHO blew up and called Smith ** Colonel Don. _____. They got an answer from the Air Force that they were not interested and knew nothing about it. On another point, referencing the Stigmata article where the farmer thought that the two humanoids may have been naked. In the case with which he was dealing with, the woman and the son, the boy upon being questioned laughed, and said they had no fronts or behinds. I asked, no sexual organs? And he said yes, no organs at all. He has received information concerning a high metabolism rate of the creatures, even bird-like. One of the witnesses, I think the woman who was being taken by the hand, said the hand of the creature was *red hot. And he guesses that it must have been 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The creatures cannot stand uncontrolled environment. They wear suits for protection against excessive heat. They are fed by a formula, and if they are short of that intake, they will turn green. Turn gray. They are light yellow-green when healthy. The heart is on the right side and they have one lung. Elimination is through the skin. The creatures are very strong. He says that the UFOs can be detected by radar detectors, and they also trigger highway patrol radar or police radar guns. His friend Valdez, at his suggestion, was looking for water intake to the site, and within about 1.5 miles he came upon a flying saucer at a distance of about 300 feet. The Indians on the area are quite scared and very superstitious, and 90% of them have moved into town. The chief of police told him about an experience he had. A tribal chief had gone deer hunting on a mesa south of Dulce. 2 days went by. When he didn't return, a search party was sent out. In the daylight on the mesa, a ship hopped up from down below and came above the mesa. The guys, human, kicked the tribal chief to the ground. Then they got into the ship and disappeared. He had been hunting and fell. He had a broken leg, and he was picked up by these people in the craft. They were blacks. No, the ship was black. Black uniforms. He discussed something about some devices called sphericals that are optical and sound. They have a sound when they move abruptly. And apparently remotely controlled little vehicles. Spheres from 1.5 to 12 in diameter. These hovering spheres have also been seen in underground bases that reach as deeply as 2 miles below Edwards Air Force Base in California. Some have referred to them as spybays. Branton. We discussed weapons used by aliens and whether or not they are used to paralyze people. Yes, they consist of a cube about 2 on a side, called a lens hung around the neck that emits a beam. Another on the ship produces a blue light that he has seen. It comes from a device about 4 high and 14 long with grid black lines on it. Is Bennewitz an abductee also? Branton. The color produced is very light blue, which is like ionized oxygen. He has not sought publicity on any of this. He is only interested in getting the facts. I continue to get reassurance that the guy is continually on the level and what he has to say should be taken seriously. Jim McCampbell comment. Ufologist Penny Harper, in the January 1990 issue of Whole Life Times, adds an unusual postscript to the Bennewitz affair in an article in which she revealed the following. Paul Bennewitz, whereabouts unknown. Paul was a scientist investigating an abduction case. A woman and her son drove down a road in the southwest. The woman witnessed aliens mutilating a calf. The aliens captured both mother and son, taking them into an underground installation. The woman observed many frightening things, apparently much of it similar to what abductee Krista Tilton and others have witnessed, yet they, mother and son, also saw human body parts floating in a vat of amber liquid. After a horrifying ordeal, the woman and her son were taken back to their car. Benoist was able to determine that there is a secret alien base beneath Dulce, New Mexico. He wrote the Dulce report and sent it to the civilian UFO group called APRO, that is Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. Benoist was then committed to the New Mexico State Hospital for the Mentally Ill, where he was given electroshock therapy. When he was discharged, he publicly stated that he would not have anything to do with UFOs. He is a recluse today, but still alive, last I heard. Chapter 23. Inside Intelligence on the Dulce Base. In a letter dated September 1990, written by Thomas E. Costello and addressed to researcher Jason Bishop, the former Dulce Base technical security officer stated, "The room for the electromagnetic generator is nearly 200 feet diameter. This circular room covers the 5th and 6th levels, extreme west-south wing. Here is the intense magnetic generator. There is a buffer area made of ceramic and latex that is 4 feet thick, in all directions. There are 5 entrances, plus an escape trap door on the 6th floor on each floor. Each portal has a double door, one at the outside of the buffer and one at the inside of the buffer. The security is severe. Armed guards patrol constantly, and in addition to weight-sensitive areas there are handprint and eyeprint stations. No one under Ultra 5 clearance is allowed near the portals. Here is the device that powers the transfer of atoms. No information is available to personnel with Ultra 7 or less. I was Ultra 7. Commander X, the mysterious and anonymous military intelligence officer and member of the Comet of 12. Com-12, who has released sensitive information through Tim Beckley's New York City-based UFO organization, has stated, the underground base outside of Dulce, New Mexico, is perhaps the one most frequently referred to. Its existence is most widely known, including several UFO abductees who have apparently been taken there for examination and then either managed to escape or were freed just in the nick of time by friendly forces. According to UFO conspiracy buff and ex-Naval Intelligence Officer Milton William Cooper, a confrontation broke out between the human scientists and the aliens at the Dulce underground lab. The aliens took many of our scientists hostage. Delta forces were sent in to free them, but they were no match for the alien weapons. 66 people were killed during this action. As a result, we withdrew from all joint projects for at least 2 years. Centuries ago, surface people, some say the Illuminati, entered into a pact with an alien nation hidden within the earth, Commander X alleges. The United States executive government, in 1933 agreed to trade animals in exchange for high-tech knowledge, and to allow them to use undisturbed underground bases. In the western USA, a special group was formed to deal with the alien beings. In the 1940s, alien lifeforms, ALFs, began shifting their focus of operations from Central and South America to the USA. The continental divide is vital to these entities. Part of this is to do with magnetics, substrata rock, and high-energy states, plasma. This area has a very high concentration of lightning activity, underground waterways and cavern systems, fields of atmospheric ions, etc. From my own intelligence work within the military, I can say with all certainty that one of the main reasons the public has been kept in total darkness about the reality of UFOs and aliens is that the truth of the matter actually exists too close to home to do anything about. How could a spokesman for the Pentagon dare admit that 5 or 10,000 feet underground exists an entire world that is foreign to a belief structure we have had for centuries? How could, for example, our fastest bomber be any challenge to those aerial invaders when we can only guess about the routes they take to the surface? Eluding radar as they fly so low, headed back to their underground lair? The Greys, or the Ebbs, have established a fortress, spreading out to other parts of the United States via means of a vast underground tunnel system that has virtually existed before recorded history. Val Valerian, of the Washington State-based Leading Edge Research Group, made the following statements in one of his LER issues. Additional comments on alien bases. There is some confusion over the subject of alien bases in the United States. There seem to be many of them, but some of them seem to stand out functionally and operationally. It would seem that the main bases in New Mexico with small detachments, human phrase, at Dreamland and Area 51 in general. Both of those locations are used to test fly alien craft, Project Grudge/Red Light. The main location for the test flights appears to be Area 51. The Excalibur project being developed at Los Alamos is designed to try and penetrate underground facilities, since they, the Greys, have entrenched themselves and no longer honor any of the dubious agreements which they have made with certain factions within the government. Scores of underground installations hold citizens of virtually every country on the planet in captivity. Researcher William F. Hamilton revealed the following details on the Dulce base, which were provided by former Dulce base security director, who is now missing and presumed deceased, Thomas Edwin Costello. In his book Cosmic Top Secret, p. 109, Hamilton writes, according to Thomas, the alien androgenal breeder is capable of parthenogenesis. At Dulce, the common form of reproduction is polyembryony. Each embryo can, and does divide into 6 to 9 individual can, pronounced kuni, that is siblings. The needed nutriment for the developing can is supplied by the formula, which usually consist of human/animal blood, plasma, deoxyhemoglobin, albumin, lysozyme, casein, amniotic fluid and more. Abductee Krista Tilton confirmed much of what Thomas Costello has revealed. Krista described strange vats filled with eerie liquid, where aliens are being grown. She stated that there were dozens of creatures in each womb. Can't count tanks, maybe scores or hundreds. Womb submerged in sort of yellow liquid. Looks thicker than water. Creatures float in amber-colored water. Womb is grayish. The creatures or embryos being bred were not human, had bluish-gray, resilient skin, and possessed 3 fingers and 2 toes. She confirmed that parts of human bodies may be used in the fluid. She says that they used her to breed a human-like child which is being held prisoner in the underground base. Val Valerian, through one of his leading-edge research reports, released the following synopsis of the so-called Dulce papers. The Dulce papers were comprised of 25 black and white photos, a videotape with no dialogue, and a set of papers that included technical information of the allegedly jointly occupied CIA alien facility 1 kilometer beneath the Arcoleta Mesa near Dulce, New Mexico. Several persons were given the above package for safekeeping. Most of those given the package were shown what the package contained but were not technically oriented and knew very little about what they were looking at. The following is written by one of these persons about what the papers contained. This person described the scenes that the videotape showed. What you see is what you get. I can't decipher what is written or drawn any more than you can. I pass these papers on only in the interest of getting to the truth. From other information I have, I believe the information herein is true. I believe the facility exists and is currently operational. I also believe that there are 4 additional facilities of the same type, one located a few miles to the southeast of Groom Lake, Nevada. What is the truth? Only God, MJ-12 and the aliens know for sure. Dulce papers, lots of papers, documents that discuss copper and molybdenum, also papers about magnesium and potassium, but mostly about copper. Lots of medical terms that I don't understand. A sheet of paper with charts and strange diagrams. Papers that discuss ultraviolet light and gamma rays. Papers that discuss color and black and white and how to avoid detection through use of certain colors. In addition to these papers there are about 25 pictures, black and white, plus 1 videotape with no dialogue, all taken inside the Dulce facility. These papers tell what the aliens are after and how the blood taken from the cows is used. Aliens seem to absorb atoms to eat. Aliens put hands in blood, sort of like a sponge, for nourishment. It's not just food they want, the DNA in cattle and humans is being altered. The type 1 creature is a lab animal. They know how to change the atoms to create a temporary almost human being. It is made with animal tissue and depends on a computer to simulate memory, a memory the computer has withdrawn from another human being. The almost human being is slightly slow and clumsy. Several so-called men in black have been described in this manner. Branton. Real humans are used for training, to experiment and breed with these almost humans. Some humans are kidnapped and used completely, even atoms. Some are kept in large tubes, and are kept alive in an amber liquid. Some humans are brainwashed and used to distort the truth. Certain male humans have a high sperm count and are kept alive. Their sperm is used to alter the DNA and create a non-gender being called type 2. That sperm is grown some way and altered again, put in large wombs, many destroyed, certain are altered again and then put in separate wombs. They resemble ugly humans when growing but look normal when fully grown, which takes only a few months from fetus size. They have a short lifespan, Less than a year. Some female humans are used for breeding. Countless women have had a sudden miscarriage after about 3 months pregnancy. Some never knew they were pregnant. Others remember contact some way. The fetus is used to mix the DNA in types 1 and 2. The atomic makeup in that fetus is half human, half almost human, and would not survive in the mother's womb. It is taken at 3 months and grown elsewhere. Chapter 24. The following account was received by Bill Cooper from a friend, and appeared under the title Robert's Story. Compare this report with other accounts concerning Dulce base extensions in northeast Arizona, southeast Utah and southwest Colorado, Four Corners area, where dissident scientists are reportedly being held captive. Robert, group of underscores. A young man in his early 20s came to work at my shop as a temporary help during the second week of October 1986. The first day at work, he approached me asking about my interest in the UFO phenomenon. Then he smiled, paused, and waited for my reaction. I told him that I was interested, particularly in the crash/recovery of saucers and bodies of occupants. That I was secondly interested in the rumors pertaining to an intelligence group alliance set up years ago. He then told me he would reveal something to me pertaining to my second interest as mentioned above. He told me the following, condensed by me. He was in the military headquartered with the 4th Engineering Group at Fort Carson, Colorado. Just got out 2 months prior to the date of telling me this. He showed me a military ID card from Fort Carson and another with a strange checkerboard design on it. He said he had a super top secret clearance and worked as a laboratory assistant in southwestern Colorado associated with the Delta Group out of Fort Carson. He witnessed cryogenic experimentation going on with human beings. This experimentation was conducted by both aliens and some super-secret intelligence group. Some high-ranking military and scientific personnel were taken down to cryogenic temperatures through a process of draining their blood and pumping a chemical mixture into the circulatory system to prevent cell destruction during the freezing and thawing periods. The aliens were the only ones who knew the mixture formula and the gradual thawing process. They at first refused to give the formula and process to the scientific team, and threatened to leave the above-mentioned personnel in that cryogenic state forever unless the scientists cooperated on some certain issues. He also told me about some alien techniques concerning time travel, dimensional travel, related to unified field physics. After revealing these seemingly fantastic things to me over a 3-week period of time, he quit the temporary job here. I finally found out that his father Robert, group of underscores, Sr. Robert used to be Robert, group of underscores, Jr. before his father and mother divorced and he took the name of his mother's second husband, group of underscores. Worked with me in the metal finishing department. The following was told to me by Robert, group of underscores, Sr. on December 16, 1986, on the evening of Wednesday, December 3, 1986. My son Robert, group of underscores, called me via the telephone. He hadn't been home for over a week. He sounded as if he were scared to death. He said, "I have to go back to Colorado immediately." I asked why. He said, "The bounty hunters found me and told me that I had to go back with them to the base in Colorado because I know too much." I asked if there were any way he could beat them and get out of it. Robert stated, "They said there is no way out." In fact, the chief bounty hunter confronted me face to face. Evidently Robert Jr. tried to beat the bounty hunters. His alleged body was found in room number 5 of the Walls Motel in Long Beach, California, with a gun in his hand and a bullet hole through his head. Drugs were found in the room, but not in his body. He was not the drug type. The Long Beach Police Department investigated the case, which ended very abruptly with no explanation. When I asked them why the case was closed so quickly, they snapped back, "It's none of your business." The final autopsy report stated that the death was a drug-related suicide. I was not allowed to see the body for 1 solid week. I would call the police, they would say the body was at the funeral parlor. The funeral parlor would say we don't have the body. This went on back and forth for that 1 solid week, December 5th, December 12, 1986. When I was finally allowed to view the body, I immediately could tell it was not him. This body, alleged to be Robert, group of underscores, was about 20 pounds heavier and about 3 to 4 inches shorter than my son. That was not Robert even though the basic facial features were his. One very significant thing that Robert stated to me before his alleged death was, "Dad, they are coming to take me away. I will give you a code name, group of underscores. Only Robert and his father know that code name. If you receive a letter, telephone call, or by messenger, sometime in the future. With this code name, you will know that I am alive. They need me for my special DNA, that is why I have to go back. Robert has special occult powers and has an interest in witchcraft. He says all of this UFO stuff is directly related to witchcraft and the occult. In February, April 1987, both Robert, group of underscores, Sr. and myself were under surveillance by what we considered an agent from the cover-up group. He went by the name of John Chun. We finally confronted him face to face concerning all of this. Needless to say, he quit work that day and never came back. Robert Sr. has been harassed several times by an individual who wanted Robert Sr. to go to the Four Corners area with him. On April 16, 1987, he said he would reunite him with his son. Group of underscores backed out the last minute. Later, Robert Sr. was picked up by the police for no reason at all and held for 1 week. When he got back home, he found out that his place had been ransacked. On November 9, 1987, a person riding a motorcycle and dressed like a biker approached group of underscores, identifying himself as Lieutenant Leader Red, and claimed that he had a top-secret clearance and had access to the files pertaining to the projects that his son was still involved in. He said that he would place group of underscores in touch with Robert, group of underscores, and said he was working in an underground base. He said you cannot find this base on any maps or in any military directories. Robert, group of underscores, was in the following unit: HHC 4th Stu Bushels, Abn. FBG 31905V, Fort Carson, Colorado. His command. Chapter 26. The Dulce Caverns in Pueblo Mythology. In his article Alien Invaders, researcher Tal Levesque reveals the following information in regards to the ancient Evadamic-Draconian conflict which has, for thousands of years, raged upon, within and beyond planet Earth. The Draconian group is a confederation. They are reptilian humanoids, with subgroups, the serpent race, from Sirius. Note, Sirius figures prominently in reports of humanoids, and also reports of reptiloid, amphiboid and insectoid activity. In this regard, the Sirius system is much like the Sol system itself. Some of these forces apparently collaborate with each other, whereas others are in conflict with each other. Branton. They set up bases inside Venus, the Earth, etc. An ancient conflict. The Indians of the Southwest USA have legends of tall, fair-haired beings. They also have legends about the little people. Both are said to have ski craft or saucers. American Indians speak of underground races, surface races and people living above, in the heavens. The Navajo legends state they once lived underground, together with the Coyoteros and the white people, below a mountain near Silverton, Colorado. Note, Mount Hesperus, meaning Venus, is sacred to them. After coming to the surface, they went south and settled in the canyons of the Doneta area, near Navajo Dam, between Aztec and Dulce, New Mexico. Note, could the ancestors of the Pueblo Indians have been the ones who originally excavated the lower levels of the Dulce base and the lower tunnels which have apparently existed within the deepest levels of the base for centuries if not millennia? If so, then why did they revert to a low-technology culture once they reached the surface? Could it be that the scientific factions of their race either established an interaction with the Greys and/or left the planet altogether, leaving the rest to fend for themselves? Hopi legends say that their ancestors were driven to the surface by another faction of their own kind who turned to practicing sorcery. Apache legends, according to Robert Morningsky, state that the Two Hearts, or the Children of the Lizard, drove the Pueblos to the surface after they had invaded their underground domain. Could both scenarios be true? In other words, could one scientific faction have remained behind in a collaboration with the reptilians, with another faction leaving the caverns in starships and/or migrating to the surface world and/or elsewhere through these ancient and massive underground systems? Branton, they then set up defense sites and expanded south towards Mount Taylor and west into Arizona. Built atop high mesas were fortresses and towers consisting of 3 or more stories. The Pajaritan Pueblo Indians have a legend that they emerged from the inner earth, near the Great Sand Dunes National Monument in Colorado. They then traveled down the Rio Grande, setting up pueblos. The area now known as Los Alamos was considered evil, the home of underworld little people, from which would come the curse of the gourd of death. And so it did in the form of the nuclear bomb. The Greys, little people, are heroes. According to New Mexican folk myth, Montezuma was born near Taos and trained by beings who lived in caverns, inside Pueblo Peak. Note, at nearby Blue Lake, UFOs have been seen entering and exiting the water. The Aztec of Mexico, who some think originally came from here, believed that the sun god needs blood and sacrificed humans for its nourishment. They killed over 20,000 people each year. Near Taos, in the cave above the Lucero River, not far from Frajola's Canyon, is where human sacrifices were made, some say even now. Note, according to one source from Baltimore, MD. One man encountered a reptiloid being while spending the night in a cave with black rock walls near some springs north of San Cristobal, not far from Taos, New Mexico. Branton, members of secret society groups, in Taos, have been found beheaded. Like Arthur Manby, who told about a secret Estland hot springs, roughly 11 miles northwest of Taos. It is flanked by petroglyphs on the canyon walls. Cultists venerate the Mayan Aztec death god, Camazotz, who took the form of a winged creature who removes the heads of his followers who displeased him. Research indicates the high priesthood had contact with winged reptoids who were known to devour humans, and the creatures were seeking various articles of commerce, possibly gold, psychoactive, hallucinogenic, plants, etc. Throughout Puebloland, on pottery, cave and cave walls, will be found decorations representing a feathered or horned snake, the plumed serpent, Quetzalcoatl. From the Pecos Pueblo, Montezuma is said to have led his followers south and founded Tenochtitlan, Mexico City. The manipulators of the mind. Alien civilizations have contacted some of the Earth's inhabitants and practiced various forms of thought control on those they have contacted. Officer Herb Schirmer, Betty and Barney Hill, and others were given hypnotic suggestions to try and make them forget the contacts. Only through strength of character and hypnotic regression were they able to talk about their experiences. The aliens use us by reaching into our minds directly. We should not respect any group which uses a method of interfering with our brain's normal electrical patterns. They use devices which produce a combination of flashing lights, pulsating sounds, elfindom fields. It is also insidious to put implants, brain transceivers, into human beings. And worse, to kill them for their blood and other nutrient substances, vital energy resident within their vital fluids. The Greys, the short, big heads, are mercenaries. They interface with humans in secret societies and the fascist military/governmental complex. And interconnected web manipulates the surface Earth cultures. The 7:8 tall reptoid/track have been seen giving directions to the Greys. The reptoids get their orders from the elite winged Draco. Note, the actual chain of command seems to begin with the rebel angels or poltergeists, which utilize biosynthetic constructed physical forms to operate in the physical dimension. These bodies have been recovered from crash disks and seem to consist of a sponge-like substance throughout, followed by the paraphysical mantis insectoid-type beings and the winged and white Dracos or Mothman, as John Keel refers to them in his book, The Mothman Prophecies, although it is not certain which of these three are superior. And then the large lizard or crocodilian-like saurian bipeds or reptiloids, a dark large muzzled 5 feet tall approx. race that are sometimes referred to as the iguanas, a satanic priest class of human-sized reptiloids that have been seen wearing dark hooded robes and seem to be a cross between the tall reptiloids and the smaller greys. A race of frog-faced amphiboid lizards approximately 4 feet tall. Various types of greys with blue-gray, brown-gray, white-gray, green-gray, tan-gray, etc. skin, as well as the genetically engineered hybrid reptiloids and greys which possess insectoid and other genetic characteristics. Followed by various non-hominoid reptilians such as the sea saurians, giant subterranean serpents, the so-called dragon worms, etc., which have been encountered within the deeper cavern systems or in the sea, and which seem to be used more for psychic energy channels. All of these various alien branches collectively make up what has been referred to as the serpent races. Branton. The winged serpent. The reptilian/amphibian humanoids have been interacting with Earth for ages. Many contactees and abductees repeatedly describe an insignia of a flying serpent on a shoulder patch, a badge, a medallion, or a helmet. Note: snakes have skeletal indications of atrophied arms and legs. There have been many transformations and metamorphoses. The serpent race, like snakes, lives underground. Yet, they can come out, in their saucers, and fly. The L-Giants. Elite caste man, the Orion Betelgeuse group, have outpost bases inside the planet Mars. They are also known as the Titans, the Brothers, etc. Note: This Mars-Orion reference is the only source we have which actually claims to identify an extraterrestrial colony of the giant L humans, Titans, Anakim, or Nephilim. The Orion star Betelgeuse is most often referred to by some contactees in reference to the giants. Some of the residents of the Jovian moons claim that they previously came from or returned from Rigel and Betelgeuse, apparently after being driven from those systems by the draconian infiltration and invasion of Orion. Although we have come across little corroborative information concerning the extraterrestrial activity of this branch of the human race, there have been roundabout accounts of possible interaction with the Orion constellation. As for the possible subterranean presence, one source claimed that several years ago a man was let down a cable into a gigantic cavern which had been broken into by a deep oil well shaft in Texas. The man claimed to have met, within the caverns, giant 11-12 feet tall humans, Anakim Nephilim, who claimed that the Creator and the angelic forces had ordered their civilization to remain in these caverns and to separate themselves from surface races where they might otherwise be worshipped as gods by ignorant humans because of their stature. This man was told, however, that this condition would last only until the day of judgment purification, at which point the giants would once again be allowed to return to the surface world. This doesn't mean that the L races do not interact with other interstellar federations or are less inclined to worship them. Several years ago, one woman by the name of Margaret Rogers claimed to have visited the underground civilization of the Nephili deep below Mexico. They said that their name for God is Tamil, which was also confirmed by the Telosian Bani or Sharula, whose people reportedly have considerable interaction with the giants. They also told Miss Rogers that one day man would develop interstellar craft and be so presumptuous as to approach the very throne of the Creator and invade his personal domain, and thus invoke his wrath upon the whole planet. Could she have been referring to the Eternity Gate within the Orion Nebula, which lies far beyond the Orion star cluster, or to the New Jerusalem Command, a virtual city of light which has reportedly been seen by government astrophysicists to be emerging from the Orion Nebula vortex and is now on a direct course to Earth, due to arrive near the end of the third millennium AD. Another source has claimed that many centuries ago these human giants left their underground cities and set out on a great expedition to the stars, only to return in later centuries from their great interstellar migration or expedition. Upon returning they re-established their ancient and vast cavern cities beneath Alaska and elsewhere, some of which had been overrun by degenerate animal men from the Earth's interior during their absence, who were particularly cruel to the natives on the surface. Ancient records state that the Anax, Nephili or Titans once dwelled in the Middle East and also the ancient Gobi region, but now live mainly at large cavernous systems deep below Alaska, Oregon, Northern California, Utah, Texas, Mexico, some of the Pacific Islands, and also other parts of the western flank of North and Central America. One friend of mine informed me of a very vivid abduction-type dream in which I came to her and took her to a cliff in the western Rockies, somehow causing part of the cliff to open up like a door with the rock moving inward and down, and took her through an inclining tile tunnel and to a large metallic door with a type of keyboard affair next to it. She claimed that in this altered state or alternate personality mode I used my left hand to punch in a quick succession on the keyboard, a kind of code that opened the metallic door and we entered. Normally in my conscious life, which does not recall this incident other than vague subjective, dreamlike images and unsolicited thoughts, I am right-handed. She claimed that I took her inside, and we met some friendly humanoid beings about 12-14 feet tall who wore silvery uniforms which seemed to be alive, in her words, or emanated life energy. During another experience she claims I had taken her to large underground chambers below the Salt Lake Valley where I was directing some kind of operation and instructing humans from the surface, who were also experiencing a double existence in this other world. My impressions are that although this collective-based alternate identity was originally psychotically induced by the Greys during past abduction experiences, as they have done with numerous abductees, this alternate self was to a certain degree reprogrammed by more friendly alien forces and became involved with various humanoid cultures within the inner Earth who were making a common defense against the reptilian invasion of their native territories. Aside from the obvious angelic influences that have guided my life, the interaction that more benevolent beings have apparently had with my alter ego would help to explain the steady flood of inspiration which has resulted in the manifestation of this current project. So I am certainly not the ultimate source or mastermind behind these Nexus/Dulce files, but merely a willing and sometimes semi-willing vessel for other sources, you might say, who have continually inspired me and led me towards a motherlode of information which would otherwise defy the laws of probability or synchronicity. These sources, based on my own personal perceptions, would include humanoid giants, hybrids, Sasquatch, dwarfs, extraterrestrials, Agartians, deep-level surface military agencies who are against the draconian agenda, and what might be considered Farian-type people of an ethereal quality yet no less human than us. Should it sound strange that there are also people dwelling within this planet who are also against draconian collectivism and who value freedom and liberties, hopefully most of us do? There is indeed a war going on right under our feet that is just as intense as anything that might have been conceived by your average science fiction or fantasy author. If this sounds unusual, then consider that an entire lost world existing throughout the crust of this planet, which has for ages remained separated from the often superstitious residents of the surface, would tend to develop a state of high strangeness, at least from our perspective. The outer world would probably seem as alien to them as their world seems to us. The separation and distinction between these two worlds, aside from the fact that it is usually only the most powerful secret societies who have access to both worlds, is often augmented by the fact that most of those throughout history who have encountered the outskirts of this lost world often reacted with fear of the unknown when they encountered something strange and unusual in connection with these portals, and normally wanted nothing more to do with them, interpreting the experiences according to their own frame of reference. And the reality of this other world below would surface in a more diluted form through legends, myths, folklore and such. If, as I am convinced, many abductees are living similar nocturnal double lives with interventionist or non-interventionist aliens, or both, we might look no farther than our own unconscious minds in order to find the aliens. In fact, from one perspective the following might be true: we have found the aliens, and they are us. Branton Tull continues, the elves will engage the Draco in battle around this planet. Most will die. Revelation 12:7, no war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon and his angels. The elite corporate/military/governmental complex of this country, and its connection to one world control cliques, are currently in negotiation with the Draco. They have threatened fail-safe, if the Draco, the serpent race, and their minions, the Greys and their human agents, do not stop exploitation of the Earth. In other words, an elite control group who have moved most of their chosen race to underground cities on the Moon and Mars, are willing to launch super-dirty nuclear weapons from deep subcity bases, manned by patriotic mind-controlled orphans, to poison this entire planet and kill everyone, so that no one can have the jewel Earth, the divine tier. Take note of the references made by contactee Alex Collier and others to the effect that some of the elite military-industrial Alternative 3 bases on the Moon and Mars were sabotaged by the Draco in 1985, and that the Draco are currently targeting the Alternative 2 underground bases below the surface of the Earth. This would tend to polarize the secret government factions even more. Those who, once in alliance with the Reptilian Collective, are now opposing the Draco-Orion collectivist forces. These are those who had not succumbed to the absolute psychological control of the Draconian Collective, or have not been infected by collectivitis, you might say, when the Dracos made their move and took possession of many of the former joint operational bases. Unless the leaders of this military-industrial underground come clean with Congress and the patriotic citizens of the United States of America and ask for their assistance and open up their underground empire for all Americans, and not just the fraternal elite, then these people will find themselves in a very difficult situation, trying to keep draconian infiltrators at bay on the one hand and attempting to appease the wrath of an awakening giant in the form of freedom-loving Americans on the other. Americans who will begin demanding access to the underground network which they paid for via taxes and other collective economic losses. Branton, The Secret of V. The following is a list of those organizations which repeatedly advertised on NBC during the first 19 V programs, a weekly, hour TV series. Advertising support came from General Electric, who happens to own NBC and has worked on the government/alien saucer projects. U.S. Army Recruiting Command, AT&T, Eastman Kodak, Onion Carbide, Chrysler Corporation, Mars, Incorporated, Warner Lambert, Ford, Sears Roebuck and Company, McDonald's, Zell Corporation, Kellogg's, Note, for years it was impossible to buy a video set of the V series. As of the beginning of 1995, the V series was released on video and became available through major video outlets. Brenton, the reptoids are returning to Earth. The invaders are here. We must convince a disbelieving world that the nightmare has already begun. Their purpose, to make Earth their world. It is not over for the human race. Freedom fighters join together. For the sake of all of the United States. Chapter 27. Dulce and the Secret Files of a United States Intelligence Worker. The following information was released by Jefferson Sousa, a contactee who has had repeated encounters with illegal Iranians, who according to Sousa are similar in appearance to the dark-skinned Orientals of India. Sousa also claims contacts with Scandinavian-appearing humans from Yama or Wolf 424, the Umo people. Both cultures utilize a huge Federation base located within a vast system of caverns deep beneath the Death Valley, Panamint MTS region of California. In fact, several Federation groups utilize the base according to Sousa, which contains whole areas specifically conditioned with the various gravitational, atmospheric and environmental conditions necessary to meet the needs of the various Federation visitors and dignitaries. The Paiute Indians of the southwest USA claim that a Greek or Egyptian-like race first colonized the massive caverns within the Panamint MTS. Thousands of years ago, one source claims the base was established around 2500 before Christ, which is incidentally about 600 years following the beginnings of the rise of Egyptian intellectual culture, when Death Valley was part of an inland sea connected to the Pacific Ocean. When the sea dried up, these people, who were described as wearing flowing robes draped over one shoulder, headbands holding back their long dark hair, and bronze-golden skin, out of necessity began to develop their collective knowledge and intellect and soon afterwards began to construct silvery flying canoes. At first these flying machines possessed wings, were relatively small, and flew with a dipping movement and a loud whirring noise. As time passed the ships became wingless, grew larger in size, and flew ever more smoothly and silently. Eventually these people, the Havmasuvs, moved their civilization into still deeper caverns which they had discovered farther underground, and commenced to explore the nearby planets and eventually other star systems as their own technological explosion began to refine every aspect of their society. These Havmasuvs have apparently had interplanetary or interstellar travel for 3,000 to 4,000 years since they first developed their flying machines. Could they have been one of the many native Turanian ancient astronaut civilizations which apparently had colonized Lyra and other systems? The story of the Panamints was related by a Navajo Indian by the name of Ogamake, who in turn heard it from an old Paiute medicine man. What about Sousa's reference to the Vejans, who are similar in appearance to East Indians? I believe that India is a major key to understanding our planet's lost history. The ancient Vedic texts speak of flying ships called Vimanas as well as nuclear technology which was utilized by the ancients there. Hinduism itself arrived in India as a result of the pre-Nordic Aryan invasion from the north, the Gobi region. Some researchers insist that the Mayas and Egyptians were originally navigators from India, possibly explaining the similarity in architecture and their advances in medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and so on. Swiss ethnoarchaeologist Yves also quotes from ancient Indian texts which state that the leaders of ancient India later collaborated with secretive Grecian intellectual societies in the development of aerial ships. So then, the Havmasuvs may have been representatives of any one of these cultures: Nordic Aryans, East Indians, Egyptians, Mayas, Greeks, or a combination of cultures. However, one thing is certain: only a very small portion of the true history of planet Earth, as of this writing, can be found in the standard historical textbooks. Jefferson Sousa claims that the following revelations are from the personal notes and scientific diaries of a scientist who was commissioned by the United States government over a period of several years to visit all crash sites, interrogate captured alien life forms, and analyze all data gathered from that endeavor. Eventually this person was discovered to have kept and maintained personal notes on his discoveries and was therefore scheduled for termination, not just job termination, which he narrowly escaped. Following 33 years of investigations, he went into hiding in 1990, the Blue Planet Project, Alien Technical Research -25. Westchester Camp. Office of Central Research No. 3. Alien Life Forms. Code, Aramis 3, ADR 3-24SM. Section, the Dulce Base. Code, J.B.3. The following material comes from people who know the Dulce underground base exists. They are people who worked in the labs, abductees taken to the base, people who assisted in the construction, intelligence personnel, NSA, CIA, etc., and some specific UFO and Earth researchers. This information is meant for those who are seriously interested in the Dulce base. For your own protection, be advised to use caution while investigating this complex. An ongoing investigation made by JB3, code SR24.3B7. Note, the author is no doubt quoting from some of the writings of a researcher and friend of yours truly, who has been at the very center of the Dulce investigations and has met with Thomas Costello personally. JB3 would be Jason Bishop 3. Branton, WHO's planet is this? These specific aliens, greys, reptiloids, consider themselves native Terrans. They are an ancient race, descendants of a reptilian humanoid species. They are untrustworthy manipulator mercenary agents from another extraterrestrial culture, the Dracos, who are returning to Earth, which was their ancient outpost before the coming of the original Uniterrestrials, to try to use it as a staging area, which is not easy at all because it causes all the other 170 different alien species to want their share of the metagene secrets. Note, these 170 are in most cases various subspecies of the humanoid and reptiloid root species, although various other transdimensional species are also visiting Earth, like the insectoids, etc. This also includes various humanoid and reptiloid species who are the products of genetic integration with various bizarre animal life forms. The metagene is an inbred gene within humans on Terra resulting from the mixture of various cultures upon the mother world or Genesis world. A genetic anomaly which can produce extraordinary characteristics and abilities in individuals, allowing them to accomplish what would be considered by many ETs to be extraordinary physical and psychic feats. Branton, but these alien cultures are in conflict over whose agenda will be followed for this planet. All the while mind control is being used to keep humans in place, artificially of course, especially since the 40s. The Dulce complex is a joint U.S. government and alien base. It was not the first one built with the aliens, and others are located in Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, Alaska, etc. The Navajo Dam is a main source for conventional electrical power, with a second source in Nevada, which is also an underground entrance to the Dulce base. Note, if RAND is the mother of think tanks, then the Ford Foundation must be considered the father. RAND's secrecy is not confined to reports, but on occasion extends to conferences and meetings. On page number 645 of the Project RAND, Proceedings of the Deep Underground Construction Symposium of March 1959, we read, just as airplanes, ships and automobiles have given man mastery of the surface of the Earth, tunnel boring machines will give him access to the subterranean world. Note, the September 1983 issue of Omni, page 80, has a color drawing of the Subterrane, the Los Alamos nuclear-powered tunnel machine, that burrows through the rock, deep underground, by heating whatever stone it encounters into molten rock magma, which cools after the subterranean machine has moved on. The result is a tunnel with a smooth, glazed lining. These underground tubes are used by electromagnetically powered sub-shuttle vehicles, which can travel at great speeds. They connect the so-called Hidden Empire sub-city complexes. Also, the top-secret project code-named Noah's Ark used the tube shuttles in connection with a system of over 100 bunkers and bolt holes, which have been established at various places on Earth, including beneath nearly every military base and many airports in North America. Branton. They built the same type of subterranean tunnels at the ultra-top-secret Moon and Mars bases as well. Many of these underground cities are complete with streets, sidewalks, lakes, small electrical cars, buildings, offices and shopping malls. Deep sections of the Dulce complex connect to natural cavern systems. A person who worked at the base, CR24/ZM35 File 4, who had an Ultra 7B clearance reports the following: there may be more than 7 levels, but I only know of 7. Most of the aliens are on levels 5, 6, and 7. Alien housing is on level 5. Trans-American Underground Sub-Shuttle System, TAUSS, overt and covert research within Dulce, as the United States Energy Secretary, John Harrington named the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory and New Mexico's Los Alamos National Laboratory to house new advanced genetic research centers as part of a project to decipher the human genome. The genome holds the genetically coded instructions that guide the transformation of a single cell, a fertilized egg, into a biological being. Note: contactee Alex Collier claims that the reptiloid species of Alpha Draconis and Rigel Orion, although involved in short-term mind control projects, are also interested in long-term genetic control, that is, introducing genetic information into a conquered race in order to keep succeeding generations subjected to the draconian elite by sabotaging certain genetic strengths. Branton. The Human Genome Project may well have the greatest direct impact on humanity of any scientific initiative before us today, said David Shirley, director of the Berkeley Laboratory. Covertly, this research has been going on for years, at Dulce Labs. Level number 6 at Dulce is privately called Nightmare Hall. It holds the genetic labs. Reports from workers CR24/ZM52 File 7, who have seen bizarre experimentation, are as follows. I have seen multi-legged humans that look half human, half octopus. Also reptilian humans, and furry creatures that have hands like humans and cry like a baby. It mimics human words, and also huge mixture of lizards and humans in cages. There are fish, seals, birds and mice that can barely be considered those species. There are several cages and vats of winged humanoids, grotesque bat-like creatures about 3.5 to 7 feet tall. Gargoyle-like beings and draco-reptoids. Level number 7 is the worst, row after row of several humans and humanoids, hundreds, perhaps thousands, in cold storage. Here too are embryo storage and storage vats of humanoids, in various stages of development. Notes: 1. Human and animal abductions, for their blood and other parts, slowed in the mid-1980s when the Livermore Berkeley Labs began production of artificial blood for Dulce and its sister complexes. 2. About the confrontation, human and alien at Dulce. 82 people were killed between scientists and the National Recon Group, apparently 66 from Special Forces and 16 scientists. Branton, the Delta Group, which is responsible for security of all alien-connected projects. Also, there were hundreds of other wounded people and 132 dead aliens. The Dulce facility is the most well-known place where this joint interaction activity occurs, although there are at least another 26 bases within the United States that have similar facilities. In the book Eds and UFOs, They Need the United States, We Don't Need Them, was an original idea for one title, but not my personal choice, by Virgin Posty Armstrong. He reports how his friends Bob and Sharon stopped for the night in Dulce and went out to dinner. They overheard some local residents openly and voicefully discussing extraterrestrial abductions of the townspeople for purposes of experimentation. The Eds were taking unwilling human guinea pigs from the general populace of Dulce and implanting devices in their heads and bodies. The townspeople were frightened and angry but didn't feel they had any recourse since the Eds had our government's knowledge and approval. Code SR-24/AK.5. Several Dulce residents are not naturally from this area. Single people and even couples with children have just come to the town of Dulce since 1948. Generations of frozen agents occupied in suspect positions. Work in a gas station, drugstore, bar, restaurant, etc. They are there to listen and report anything which violates their limit of security. Always in the town of Dulce, you never know who is who. The Dulce base is run by a board. Small Bullet. The chairman of the board is John Harrington. Small Bullet. Jim Baker of Tennessee is the NSA/CIA link to Dulce. Small Bullet. House Speaker Jim Wright of Dallas, Texas, the nation's third highest office, is the treasurer at Dulce. There is currently a power struggle going on, as Representative William Thomas, R. California, put it. Part of Jim Wright's problem is he fails to understand what's equitable and fair. It's the arrogance of power. Even among his fellow Democrats, many find Wright to be uncomfortable. Wright's operating style leaves him vulnerable. Most meetings of the Dulce boards are held in Denver, Colorado and Taos, New Mexico. Former New Mexico Senator Harrison Schmitt, publicly known as Last Man on the Moon, has full knowledge of Dulce. He was one of 7 astronauts to tour the base. In 1979, he held an animal mutilation conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This was used to locate researchers and determine what they had learned about the links between the mute operations and the alien/government deals. Senator Bryant of Nevada knows about the ultra-secrets at Dreamland and Dulce. So do many others in the government. This is what the UFO researchers are up against, so be careful. They have killed to keep this information secret, And by reading this document, you now know more than they want you to know. After all, a fascist group, within this country, had John Kennedy assassinated and got away with it. Look to the links within the larger umbrella, the web of a fascist totalitarian secret police state, within the Pentagon, JCS, DIA, Division 5 of the FBI, DISC/DIS and CIA. Other information contained in the Blue Planet Project manuscript includes information on various secret government projects, including the following: Small Bullet, the MAGI, Majestic Agency for Joint Intelligence Projects, Small Bullet Sigma, initial project involved with attempts to establish communication with alien intelligence. Small Bullet Plato, responsible for establishing diplomatic relations with the aliens. This project secured a formal treaty, illegal under the United States Constitution, with the alien Greys. Small Bullet Aquarius, concerned with investigating the history of alien presence on Earth and interaction with human beings. An outgrowth of this project is a huge thesaurus-like document called the Yellow Book describing aliens, their history in regards to humanity, and technology. Note, some believe that the Yellow Book is filled with alien propaganda meant to make government agents vulnerable to alien psychological manipulation. For instance, this would include the deception that humanity is a genetic creation placed on this planet by the reptilians, and so on. And the potential results of such propaganda, for instance, that since they are our creators, we have absolutely no defense against them and might as well try to negotiate with them and attempt to appease our creators by giving them what they want. Branton Garnett, a project responsible for control of all information and documents regarding the alien subjects and accountability of their information and documents. Pluto, a project responsible for evaluating all UFO and identified alien craft information pertaining to space technology. Pounce, a project that was formed to recover all downed and or crashed craft and aliens, and provide cover stories and operations to mask the true endeavors whenever necessary, that is such as cover stories of crashed experimental aircraft, construction, mining activities, etc. NRO, National Recon Organization, based at Fort Carson, Colorado. Responsible via Delta Forces for security on all alien or alien spacecraft and underground base projects. Delta, the special arm of the NRO, which is especially trained and tasked with security of all magic projects, MAGI or Magic Oversea MJ-12. Also codenamed Men in Black, the Delta Forces are trained to provide alien task projects and Luna base security. Blue Team, the first project responsible for reaction and recovery of downed and or crashed alien craft and or aliens. This was the United States Air Force Material Command Project. Also synonymous with Alpha Team Crash/Retrieval projects. Sign, the second project responsible for collection of intelligence and determining whether alien presence constituted a threat to the United States national security. Sign absorbed the Blue Team projects. This was the United States Air Force and CIA project. Red Light, the project involving the test flying and back engineering of recovered alien craft at Area 51, Groom Lake, Greenland, Nevada. UFO sightings of craft accompanied by black unmarked helicopters are Project Red Light assets. Snowbird, established as a cover for Project Red Light. This project is activated from time to time when it is necessary to provide cover stories for red light operations, etc., by releasing information on advanced conventional military aircraft which are used to explain unexplained UFO sightings. Blue Book, of the United States Air Force, UFO, an alien intelligence collection and disinformation project. This project was terminated and its collected information and duties were absorbed by Project Aquarius. A classified report named Grudge/Blue Book, Report No. 13 is the only significant information derived from the project and, other than information from second-hand sources, is unavailable to the public. Reports number on-12 and No. 14 are available to the public. The Grudge/Blue Book Report No. 13 mentions that many military government personnel and civilians have been terminated, murdered without due process of law when they had attempted to reveal the alien interaction with the secret government. Some of MAGI's secret weapons against the aliens include Small Bullet Gabriel, a project to develop high-frequency pulse sound generating weapons that would be effective against alien crafts and beam weapons. The project also involves working with high-frequency microwaves. Small Bullet Joshua, the development of low-frequency pulse sound generating weapons. This weapon was developed and assembled at Lingtemco in Anaheim, California. It was described as being able to totally level any man-made structure from a distance of 2 miles. It was tested at the White Sands Proving Grounds, and developed between 1975 and 1978. It is a long horn-shaped device connected to a computer and amplifiers. The project also involves low-frequency and microwave projection. Small bullet Excalibur. This is a weapon designed to destroy alien underground bases, developed and funded mostly by intelligence branches connected with the United States Navy and D projects who have rejected any further interaction with the Greys after they turned on us during the Groom Massacre and the Dulce Wars. Some patriotic elements of MJ-12 and the MiG- military-industrial complex support this agenda of resistance, whereas other elements tied in with the corporate imperialists of the international banking community support continued collaboration for purposes of acquiring further mind control technology for their New World Order. Excalibur is a missile capable of penetrating 1,000 meters of tufa/hard-packed soil, such as is found in New Mexico, with no operational damage resulting. The missile's apogee is not to exceed 30,000 feet above ground level. An impact must not deviate in excess of 50 meters from designated target. The device carries a 1 to 10 megaton nuclear warhead. The secret for a self-contained missile drill, a vertical shaft over 1,000 meters deep, consists in an energosyntetizer macrowave deflector in the missile warhead. Small Bullet Magic has 5 other major weapons to be used against the aliens, however little if any information on these is available. Also from the same report we find the following information on reptiloid alien forms: average height, male -2.0 meters. Female -1.4 meters. Average weight, M-200 kilos. F-100 kilos. Body temperature, M, ambient temperature. F, ambient temperature. Pulse/respiration, M-40 tenths. F-40 tenths. Blood pressure, M-80 fiftieths. F-80 fiftieths. Life expectancy, M-60 Earth years. F-23 Earth years. Cold-blooded. Like all reptiles, the reptiloid is found to flourish in a warm, tropical climate, normally artificial. Big caves. With imperfect respiration providing just enough oxygen to supply tissues and maintain the processing of food and combustion, their temperature can be raised only a few degrees above the ambient. This suggests that heat weapons, like flamethrowers and so on, may prove to be nearly immediately effective and fatal to this species under battle conditions. The reproductive system is oviniparous, with eggs hatching in the oviduct prior to birth. The underdeveloped reptiloid, for fast activities, physical activities, cerebellus results in a slowness and simplicity of movement. The reptiloid eye is composed of thousands of microscopic facets, each facet with its own independent protective lid. The eye is almost never closed entirely during waking hours. Rather, sections of the organ are shut down in conjunction with the dominant light source. The reptiloids survived hidden inside the earth within big caves underground. Information on the insectoids: average height, master race, male -1.6 meters. Female -1.2 meters. Average height, servant race, male -1.0 meters. Female -1.0 meters. Average weight, master race, male -70 kilos. Female -40 kilos. Average weight, servant race, male -35 kilos. Female -35 kilos. Body temperature, male -110 halves. Female -110 halves. Life expectancy, male -130 Earth years. Female -130 Earth years. Note, are the current attempts to create a genetic reptilian insectoid hybrid race, like those genetically mutated species reportedly existing in Bellatrix Orion, a result of the reptiloid's desire to increase their lifespan? Branton. The insectoid retina is composed entirely of tone-sensitive rods, and is incapable of discrimination between different wavelengths of light. Therefore, the addition of color to the insectoid's vision is accomplished by the dual antennae which, in addition to being auditory receptors, are made up of a complex network of wavelength-sensitive cones. Owing to the highly directional nature of the antenna, the corona of vision is perceived by the subject in the tones of gray. Because of this correlation of 4 independent light-receptive organs, insectoid vision can be correctly termed quitroscopic, resulting in relatively superior depth perception. Insectoid auditory capabilities are highly developed, and insectoids are capable of distinguishing from among a wider range of audio frequencies than is normal for humanoids. Because of the monodirectional antennae, insectoids, most of which have been observed in the form of giant mantis, locust or grasshopper-type entities, Branton, usually listen with their head tilted slightly downward. They also have a limited exoskeleton. More alien races mentioned in the secret report. 1. Type A, Rigelian, Rigel, or the Grey. 2. Type B, 2 Reticuli, Xereticuli 1, or Grey. 3. Type C, 2 Reticuli, Xereticuli 2, or Grey. 4. Type D, Orion, Pleiades, or Nordic. 5. Type E, Barnard's Star, the Orange. Information on the Rigelian Reptilian Greys. Luna 1 is the Rigelian base on the far side of the Moon. It includes a base, a mining operation using very large machines, and very large alien crafts or carrier ships. Wavnest is the Rigelian base in the Atlantic Ocean, and includes an underwater alien base, mining and big cigar-shaped crafts. Rigelians made contacts with certain members of the military-industrial, corporate, or secret government complex from 1947 to 1971. The government thought that the Greys meant us no harm, but in 1982 and 1988 the picture that emerged was exactly the opposite. The story now is one of great deception at several levels. The Greys' Trojan horse-style manipulation and lying involved MJ-12/magic forces. The current agreements with the Greys within the NSA-connected levels of the military-industrial complex, some sources have implied, continue as a result of the large level of alien infiltration and mind control that exists throughout certain levels of the intelligence community. Branton. The inner core of the CIA/NSA is deeply controlled by the Greys. Working under the instructions of the aliens from Rigel, the CIA informer. Nazi scientists have developed and deployed malignant strains of bacteria and viruses, including AIDS, in order to exterminate undesirable elements of the human population. Information on the Nordic races. Average height, male -2.0 meters. Female -1.7 meters. Average weight, male -90 kilos. Female -70 kilos. Body temperature, male -98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Female -98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Pulse/respiration, male -72.5/16. Female -72.5/21. Blood pressure, male -128ths. Female -80/50ths. Life expectancy, male -60 Earth years. Female -23 Earth years. Note, according to other sources, this low life expectancy is probably greatly exaggerated. Branton. Information on the Orange. Average height, male -1.7 meters. Female -2.0 meters. Average weight, male -70 kilos. Female -50 kilos. Body temperature, male -91 degrees Fahrenheit. Female -91 degrees Fahrenheit. Pulse/respiration, male -232/61. Female -232/61. Blood pressure, male -80/40ths. Female -80/40ths. Note, the Orange are reportedly humanoids, with red, stocky hair and in some cases may have been genetically tampered with and imputed with various levels of reptilian genetics, making them a quasi-hybrid race although apparently mostly human in many cases. Unlike the reptilians, however, they have external reproductive organs and are apparently capable of mating with other humanoid races. They come from the Barnard's star system. On certain rare occasions they have been seen with facial hair, beards, etc. Apparently some strains of the Orange hybrids are more humanoid than are others. Branton, we will close this section by quoting from one more installment of the Blue Planet Project, the metagene factor. The metagene is a biological variant lying dormant in select members of the human race, especially on planet Earth, until an instant of extraordinary physical and emotional overstress activates it. Apparently a latent self-preservation gene capable of producing seemingly superhuman abilities in Earth humans during times of extreme stress or crisis. Branton, that's an energochemical, in response to adverse stimuli. A chromosomal combustion takes place, as the metagene takes the source of bias stress, be it chemical, radioactivity, or whatever, and turns the potential energoresponse into a catalyst for genetic change. The main focus of the catalyst power is a gland in the middle of the human brain called the pineal gland, and the nutrient for increasing the pineal's action is the adrenaline. The metagene factor gives the ability of psionic power, for better or worse. The main interest of the aliens, especially the Greys, is to understand and control the metagene for their own race. They try to do this using biological experiments to make hybrids from both humans and aliens. They believe perhaps the men from planet Earth are the deadliest creatures in the universe. Because only on Earth people are apparently capable of generating the metagene factor, which means natural Psionics ability, real power. Note, power for good or evil, you might say. One of the reasons that humans on Earth are being controlled/harnessed, as is the case with the Nazi and SA military-industrial space forces, or denied advanced interplanetary technology as in the case of those who have not been brought under their control, is simply because the aliens, especially the malevolents, are terrified that if a free non-collectivist human society from Earth gets a foothold in space, then we would pose a deadly threat to their alien agendas of conquest and manipulation throughout the galaxy. This is why they are intent on taming or harnessing the metagene factor as they have done with the fascist forces based in Antarctica via massive mind control, so that these forces can be channeled as human shields or warriors to fight their battles in space against interstellar cultures who would otherwise resist the activities of the Draconian collective. We must demand from the military-industrial complex, which has been built with our tax dollars, and which is being deeply influenced by alien/fascist forces, that they cease from selling us out, and share their interplanetary technology with the rest of us, so that we as a whole can access the stars rather than just a core of super-wealthy and alien-controlled elite. If we as a constitutional republic and Congress rightfully take overt control of whatever space projects have and are being financed by our tax dollars, then the open space policy and public conscience itself will prevent these space forces from engaging in any unjustified military actions against peaceful worlds that would defy the foundational ethics of the United States Constitution on the one hand, or will prevent us from allying ourselves with any exploitative and manipulative alien force on the other hand. Branton. The principal races in the universe are psychologically the same. The pure cold logic is a normal order to most important races. Basic sameness makes for predictability and security. The enemy one knows are the ones you can guard against. This is not the case with unpredictable mankind. While most are uniformly human, some, many more, apparently, than anyone had dreamed, possess a latent tendency towards superhumanity, natural Psionic abilities. That in itself could prove dangerous for any idea of alien domination on Earth. Note, for instance, some Tyrans have the ability to scan the for universal Psionic field with their superconscious minds via projecting and focusing their magnetic body at various levels on a conscious or unconscious basis, and any subjective danger that is detected through this process is converted to consciousness via intuition. This might be compared with remote viewing, which is simply the human brain's ability to tune into and ride the universal Psionic field or the flow line like a biochemical radio receiver scanning the Psionic air waves, and Psionic waves are a tangible energy form that can be measured just as radio waves can. The electromagnetic grid of any planet, and supposedly the fields which connect the planets and stars at a subtle level, serve as the energy web in which thought forms are trapped and contained. Humans are multidimensional beings and therefore have the ability to perceive the vast reservoirs of thought forms within these interstellar grids on an intuitive level, for instance when they are dreaming. During the dream state the brain operates on a lower frequency, and what we might call Psionic long waves are produced which can reach out and connect with others. Long waves on the same frequency, or connect with the Psionic field itself and observe the psychic atmosphere resident within any certain area through tapping into the reservoir of thought forms there. This would explain why people often have vivid dreams near high-energy grid areas, simply because these areas tend to trap more thought form, Psionic or psychic energy residue than do other areas. Also astral, human or animal life forms which have become trapped within these Psionic energy grids by encountering powerful zones like that which exists in the Bermuda Triangle area, essentially having entered into or become part of a world of thought forms, a dimension density where events and objects are more fluid than they are in the third dimension, might be contacted, for better or worse, while in the dream state. Not all of the beings or even dreamscapes that one encounters within the dream state are the exclusive products of one's own subconscious mind. Branton, by coupling mankind's inherent belligerence with the fact of the metagene effect, each human is unique and Earth becomes a spawning ground for an unpredictable super race, if we have the chance. Others have already demonstrated an awareness of man's potential throughout human history. This is because the aliens are here to try to control Earthlings before we dominate them, and they want our most important secret, the metagene factor, which is the aliens' only hope. Chapter 28. The organization inside the collaboration. The following information comes from an article written by researcher William Hamilton, titled Magical Caverns, which was in turn based upon Hamilton's book Alien Magic. The first case of subterranean abduction that I investigated occurred in 1988. I never reached a firm conclusion regarding the information that resulted from this investigation, but did receive corroborating reports from other abductees. The incident occurred in the Rosamond area of the Antelope Valley in California, up on the sides of the Tehachapi Mountains. The Tehachapi Mountains rise on the north side of the valley. There is a saddle in the mountains, and a secret Northrop electromagnetic testing facility is in the area just below the saddle. The Northrop facility has been dubbed the Ant Hill, or the Black Hole, by some of the locals, who refer to it as a multi-leveled underground facility. Ray and Nancy worked at the Northrop B-2 assembly factory in Palmdale. Ray is a Native American. Ray was an aircraft inspector and worked swing shift. One June night he decided to take a midnight ride with Nancy up to the cut in the Tehachapi Mountains. This cut appears as an inclined whitish mark on the side of the foothills. It actually marks the site of a road that winds up around the mountains. On the backside is an entrance to an artificial plateau that had been blasted out of the rocks. Ray parked his truck on this plateau. They got out to look at the stars in the city lights of Lancaster and Palmdale and the valley far below. While looking at the stars, Nancy noticed that some of them were moving around and brought it to Ray's attention. Ray got his flashlight out of the truck and started signaling the lights. At some point, Nancy noticed a bright basketball-sized orb hovering just above a nearby knoll. They both walked closer to get a better look at the orb. Ray thought it had just risen out of some invisible opening in the ground. It seemed to be flashing and sparkling. Some sort of line dangled from its underside. It rose a little higher and Nancy tried to speak to it, having an intuitive feeling that some intelligence has guided the orb to that plateau for their benefit. As they watched this strange phenomenon around 1 o'clock in the morning, they next observed the morning dawn light over the far distant eastern hills. Something had just snatched 4 hours of time out of their lives. The orb was gone. They were terrified and drove quickly home. The next day, they felt a vibration going through their apartment. When they went outdoors, they saw 2 orbs hovering above their apartment. This scared them badly. I took Ray and Nancy to a local hypnotist and she regressed Ray. Nancy refused to be regressed, expressing fear over what she might discover about those 4 hours of missing time. Ray was an excellent subject. When in trance, with little prompting, he fell backwards nearly to the floor before we caught him. The regression brought out some amazing revelations. Ray and Nancy had been abducted and taken underground. Under hypnosis he kept mentioning the Kern River to the north. There is an area near the Tehachapi Mountains called the Kern River Project. The upper river is being used by the government for hydroelectric power, to power an underground facility at Tehachapi Ranch, actually, the Tejon Ranch. The mountain next to the power facility is being hollowed out. There is mud all around and it's so obvious, but apparently people aren't looking. All the power is being used for the ranch, which is the site of underground skunk works where highly technical aircraft, spacecraft and all kinds of stuff are being dealt with. It is a huge underground base, probably close to the size of the 129 Palms Marine Base. It has huge hangars and very large elevators as well as technical laboratories. There is a whole city under there, large passageways. The whole valley is full of tunnels. You can drive from one end to the other underground. You can drive from Palmdale, site of the Northrop, Lockheed and Black Project areas, to California City. All underground. There are tunnels all the way to George F. Aliens apparently have access. They've been seen all over the place. The corporate government lets them do whatever they want. They are probing the human brain, trying to find our weaknesses and learning how to control us, like they've apparently learned to control the secret corporate government elite, who in turn control these underground military-industrial networks and who have in essence turned these facilities over to the aliens, whether out of fear of retaliation, out of some type of global control agreement, or just plain mind control. Branton. They dissect humans. Can't describe the dissections because they are not humane. Really morbid. The government knows it. They just turn their heads. Some people in the government want to stop this, but they don't know how to stop it. Note, as so many in the know have already said, the entire alien interaction scenario is completely out of control, which I would guess means that we are no longer in control of the situation. In other words, the framework, which was created as a result of the alien interaction projects when most of the human collaborators believed that the aliens were benevolent, is still in place, even after we lost control of the situation. Since the aliens now have control of much of the infrastructure that grew out of the early interaction projects, the control structure or establishment itself will not and cannot do anything about the situation. It is up to those on Earth who are not bound by security restrictions, or fraternal secret society oaths, or in the case of humanoid visitors, those who are not bound by non-interference directives, such as the many Nordic Terran hybrids, who have according to Michael Wolff and others been legally born into this society. In other words, it is those and only those who are free from and operating outside of the system who have the power to change the situation for the better. Branton Ray was disconcerted that Grays had Nancy strapped to a table in this facility. He could see instruments all around. During hypnosis he would freeze up when recalling this scene. He yelled and became very emotional. He was convinced they would rape her and violate her, yet he was helpless to prevent it. He and Nancy also felt they had contact with a benevolent race of aliens who had observed their capture by the Greys. After a few months, Ray and Nancy announced to me that they wanted little more to do with reporting further events. They felt exposed and monitored and feared retribution if they continued talking. They last told me they intended to go to Bible classes to find refuge from this enormous evil that encroached upon their lives. Many witnesses have observed unusual phenomenon over the Tejon Ranch. One night on March 3, 1991, Pearl Schultz and Eric Leavitt sighted 5 or 6 UFOs moving in pairs at various speeds and sometimes switching directions over the Tehachapi Mountains. Each had a pulsating light that alternated from bright white to heavy red. Mrs. Schultz noticed orange and yellow colors. Some of the UFOs seemed to come from the Saddle area. A man named Stan saw a bright flash of orange light which seemed to have a cigar shape. He saw this from Avenue I looking northwest over the Tehachapis. 3 witnesses went up to the plateau near the anthill on January 31, 1991. They saw a green glowing disc take off from this facility without any apparent acceleration and climb at a 45-degree angle to the south. They also heard a tone when they sighted the object. When traveling back down the road 170th Street West, they saw 2 black vans and 2 black helicopters. In the morning dawn, a pilot was flying out of Fox Field on Avenue G headed for Merced. His flight path would take him over the Tehachapis. When passing over the Saddle, where the anthill is located on February 23, 1991, he observed 4 white rectangular objects hovering over the facility. He described them as being 4 times the size of a typical highway billboard. They were each separated by about 200 yards. Another observer, who was called on the phone, drove his car out to the highway and observed these same objects before they winked out. Cloaked. Branton, one local man who has property on 170th Street West, reported seeing the ground open up like a missile silo within the fence perimeter surrounding the Northrop installation. He saw a flying saucer emerge from this silo and take off. He also claimed that someone from Edwards had come to talk to him about his story and told him to shut up. I further found out that the man's name is Chuck and he was a contractor who worked on the underground tunnels in the anthill facility. He said the tunnels have round doorways with panels that have red and green lights for ID and entry. There are no doors covering these doorways, but some kind of field is projected from cylinders embedded in the door wall. Tiny globes hovered in the tunnels and followed Chuck and his crew around. He thought they were being used by the Air Force as sensors. But where did the Air Force get the technology to levitate these orbs? Joe told me a lot of stories. He attended many of my forum meetings in Lancaster. He claims to have had a close encounter and missing time when traveling a road through the south side of Edwards Ave one night. Joe was in construction and held clearances for working in military operation areas. He said that he had worked on an underground tunnel project below Haystack Butte on the eastern boundary of Edwards near the NASA rocket test site. He also claimed that he saw orbs roving around these tunnels. He painted numbers inside a box located on a stripe that ran horizontally midway along the tunnel walls. I asked him how far this tunnel ran below the Earth's surface. He said that he and fellow employees used to count as the elevator descended to the tunnel level. From the count and from the elevator speed, I estimated that the tunnel must have been around 3,000 feet deep. One time he saw a door open to a room in one of these tunnels, and he could see a very tall alien standing next to 2 men in white lab coats. He thought this alien was all of 9 feet tall. He claims that he saw two gray aliens inside a hangar at China Lake one day when he went back inside the hangar after finishing his work to retrieve a tool that he had left behind. Joe was always telling me fantastic stories, yet he seemed very sincere. I never knew whether to believe him. One day Joe told me about two old school buddies he had run across. They both held jobs in underground facilities and had worked at the anthill, he said. They would work underground for 2 weeks at a stint. They lived in condos when working underground. These condos were also built into the underground facility. The government even picked up the tab on one guy's alimony. One was known as a computer genius. He said that he had seen both gray and reptilian life forms in various underground facilities. One of the underground projects was Project Star Talk. The work involved lasers. The informer, a guy named Paul, said that he worked in a big underground building 350 feet across. Project Star Talk utilized a powerful laser which strikes a mirror and is sent into space. The laser is modulated with a signal and acts as a beacon to bring in UFOs. Apparently, the beacon is directed at friendly forces from other systems. He also worked at the Douglas facility near Llano. He once saw a saucer land and go into an underground hangar. Inside the underground building is a huge computer complex. The workers wear white clothing and white socks, no shoes. The computers use an alien symbolic language. Manuals indicate codes that can be entered. There is a large Lexon plastic screen in this complex that displays various star systems and galaxies. A wax pencil is used to indicate targets for the laser. The technology used is so far advanced that it is beyond known engineering technology. The laser is also capable of interdimensional communication. Hyperspace or subspace communication? It would have to be so, since laser light modulated in third-dimensional beams would take at least 3 years to reach the nearest star. Branton, security workers accompany all workers, even to the bathroom. Phones are tapped, even workers' home phones. It took Paul and Gopher, the second guy, 2 years to get a security clearance. Note, if the military-industrial establishment or the corporate government is involved with the alien interaction as it would seem to be, then the electorate government does not have entire control of the situation. Those who control these corporate structures do. Or those whose motivation is to increase their wealth and power even if it means making business deals with malevolent alien forces. Their motivation would not necessarily be to govern the American citizens nor uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. As they say, the lust for money is the root of all evil. Branton Gopher also worked at the anthill as a computer specialist. He has also worked at Lockheed's Helendale facility and at the Nevada test site. Gopher says that we are working with aliens and alien technology and it scares the hell out of him. He gets paid well. He makes $145,000 a year and the government pays his alimony. He says he has also worked at Section D, better known as the Dulce facility. He has seen reptoids and greys in these underground facilities. He doesn't have a life of his own. He worked with white-skinned reptoids, probably the white Draco that Thomas Costello spoke of, Branton. He has also seen members of the Orange Race. He has not seen any benefit to humanity. He is trying to find out what is going to happen. He is worried about what the future holds. He foresees an alien war. He has a good lifestyle underground. Besides their condo, he has swimming pools, saunas, and a gym at his disposal. He works 14 to 16 days on a shift. He is not allowed to leave the country and must obtain permission to leave the state. He says the main control center in the valley is at Haystack Butte. A tunnel runs from Haystack Butte to the anthill. Gopher believes there are benevolent aliens and says he saw one once. They are from a federation. The one he saw was human-looking, a tall blonde Nordic that wore a white jumpsuit and had a green coat over it. He believes that we are trying to enlist the aid of such friendly beings. This is a very similar scenario to what I received in the letter from a veteran. My friend's stepson obtained a job in an underground facility at Los Alamos. He says there is a tube shuttle that runs from that underground facility to Section D. He worked on Level I, which runs under Main Street in Dulce. 1 block from the Pan Am building is the old high school, now used as an engineering facility by Haken Hangar, originally Zia Corporation. Inside the facility is an elevator that ascends to the computer room. From the computer room a side tunnel intersects the main tunnel transit tube that runs from Los Alamos to Albuquerque. These levels are protected by Pro-Force security. At deeper, more secure levels exist automatic devices that kill intruders. A security guard accidentally tripped an alarm and was killed by one of these. These tunnels are a minor part of a vast network of such tunnels. One other thing mentioned by this source is an underground city which housed a population of thousands who occupied condos. Many of these people lived permanently underground. Some of the advanced technological research going on involves genetic labs using laser fusion. The budget for the surface facility alone is over $1 billion a year, but the underground research projects get many times this amount. How much of this comes from our hard-earned tax dollars? Is the American economy and our wealth literally going down the tubes? Brenton, Pam and I were introduced to an abductee named Diane a few years ago. Diane lives over in the Apple Valley area. She had ongoing alien encounters since she was a child. As she grew older, she started experiencing abductions by humans that took her to underground facilities. One of these underground facilities she believed was located at China Lake Naval Weapons Test Center just west of the Panamint Range in Death Valley, Brenton. She was taken down to lower levels in an elevator. Her description of this elevator matched the description given by a man named Thomas of an elevator in use at the Dulce facility. Thomas' description of this and other details were never published at the time so that we could check out corroborating eyewitness reports. Evidently these elevators have an unusual shape and operate on magnetic forces in the elevator shaft rather than using cable systems to run the elevator up and down the shaft. Diane also reports that she was taken on a tour of one part of the facility by a man in a white coat. He showed her humans that had been biologically altered. These humans were housed in cages set about a foot above the floor. She also saw altered animals. Her story was just as bizarre as Thomas' story of Level 7 at Dulce. The story of an underground base on the Jicarilla Apache Indian Reservation first came to light around 1980 when Albuquerque physicist Paul Bennewitz reported the crash of an alien ship on the slopes of Archuleta Mountain. Paul wrote a letter to Senator Pete Domenici and Paul Gilman in Washington, D.C. This letter was accompanied by a report. He said, "Atomic ship originally outlined in my report. Copy to you. Several years ago had crashed approximately 2 miles northwest of Dulce, New Mexico near Archuleta Peak on Archuleta Mesa." He believed there was a concern because gamma and neutron radiation could be emitted from the crash site if there had been a nuclear meltdown. Paul's Thunder Scientific Corporation manufactured various detection instruments. In his Project Beta report, Bennewitz stated that humanoid aliens had a base near Archuleta Mesa and that he had established direct computer communication with aliens at the base. He did not believe the aliens to be trustworthy. Paul became paranoid about the government, the aliens, and admitted abductees whom he believed were being controlled by the aliens. At a muffin conference held in Las Vegas in 1989, featured speaker Bill Moore made the statement that Paul Bennewitz was fed disinformation by intelligence agents, that he contributed to this effort, and the whole story concerning the Dulce facility was constructed around these bits of disinformation that were fed to Paul. Or was it a case of reverse disinformation in the same vein as reverse psychology? Brenton. However, testimony from Walter Baumgartner and state police officer Gabe Valdez indicates otherwise. According to them, they had seen video images of aliens that Paul had made contact with using his special equipment, that is, a video radio link utilizing a hexadecimal code with computer printout which he used to interrogate the aliens' collective intelligence via ship-to-base communication frequencies. Brenton. These aliens would send messages that would output on Paul's computer printer. Some of the sentence structure was disjointed. Were intelligence agents taking extreme measure by coaxing computer communications with Paul? For what purpose? Apparently Bennewitz was using special transmitter coils to send and receive electromagnetic signals to and from the alien base. Then along came Thomas. Thomas E. Costello was born in Glen Ellen, Illinois on April 23, 1941. Thomas was the man who released the Dulce papers. His good friend, Ann West, pseudonym, true name on file, Brenton, tells his story, as Thomas has not been heard from since 1991. Thomas had a passion for antique cars, any antique car, but especially Packards, and especially the big-nosed cars of the 40s and early 50s. A lot of his spare time was spent modifying his 1939 Packard, and he needed special parts. His friends told him about an older man in town that had a machine shop that could rebuild antique cars. This old man was Ed West, Ann's father. He found Ed easy to talk to, not just about cars, but anything. The two spent endless hours discussing cars, planes, and the space program. Tom and Ed found they were both fascinated with flying saucers. After a few months, Ed introduced Tom to the organization, a group that did deep research on flying saucers and contactees. Tom completed initiation into the group and was soon on several assignments. At that time in 1961, Tom was in the Air Force, stationed at Nellis F. near Las Vegas. He was schooled in photography, and had received a top-secret clearance. He was given the opportunity of receiving additional training in Virginia. There, he had his first experience of working in an underground base. When he left that facility, his top-secret clearance was upgraded to TS4. His duties as an Air Force sergeant included photographing a runway exercise in Florida. He would meet with Ann during his off-duty time in Orlando. Tom was pleased to discover that Ann drove a classic 1950 Packard Straight 8 with a beautiful swan as a hood ornament. The next year, 1963, Ann moved to Las Vegas to be near her folks. When she was in Florida, she had a close encounter with a glowing flying saucer and was actually taken on board. The haunting dreams and memories of this incident bothered Ann. Tom introduced her to the organization. After a few visits, Ann became initiated into the group and started certain assignments. She and Tom began to collect books, articles, and magazines about UFOs. They would spend nights doing research. Over the years, Tom became like a brother to Ann. His parents were killed in a car accident, so he adopted Ann's parents into his heart. Tom stayed in high-security photography for 7 years, then left the Air Force in 1971. He began working for Rand Corporation in California as a security technician. Within a year, his clearance was upgraded to Ultra 3. Tom met Kathy in 1972 and got married. In November 1974, Kathy gave birth to Eric Scott Costello. They moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1977. Tom had been transferred and his clearance upgraded to Ultra 7. He found his new position financially rewarding, but more stressful. He told Ann that he worked in an underground facility that had incredible security, for the photography department. His job touched on all aspects of photography from large-format cameras to mini cameras. It was his responsibility to check, align, and calibrate all the security video cameras, from the doors to exit tunnels. His position required that he be armed at all times. It was also his job to escort visitors to certain areas of the base. This facility came to be known as the Dulce base. When Tom finally left his job, he had earned the security rank of major. Tom and Kathy, and Tal and Mary Levesque, all lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1979 when Ann went to visit them. Tom seemed more intense than usual. He said that he wished that he could talk to Ann about his concerns, but his high security clearance prevented him from saying much. The day Ann left New Mexico, Tom pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand and whispered quietly, "Don't let anyone see this." She slipped it into her pocket. That night, alone at a motel in Durango, she opened the paper. There were 3 things on its yellow page: a sketch of an alien, an inverted triangle, and the name Dulce. She stared at the mysterious drawing and tried to figure out what it all meant. The alien in the drawing had a large head, big black eyes, no nose and no hair. The triangle was shaded black. After looking at it, she flushed the paper down the toilet. That night, she had nightmares about aliens. The next morning, over coffee, she was looking at a map for the route back to Las Vegas when she noticed the name of a small town near the New Mexico state line called Dulce. Were there aliens in Dulce? What was Tom trying to tell her? Then she remembered where she had seen the black triangle before. The symbol was on a hat on Tom's coffee table. It was burnt orange with a black inverted triangle with gold bands cutting it in 3 sections. Note, it is interesting that this 3-level triangle is inverted, when we consider that some Nordic groups use an upright triangle with 3 horizontal lines through it as their emblem. Some Christian sources have reported visions of the New Jerusalem city mentioned in the Book of Revelation, as being a vast city of light and of pyramidal shape and in 3 levels. This city of light has been reportedly observed, using super-powerful telescopes, to be emerging from the nebula far beyond the Orion cluster, and it is said to be on a direct course to Earth. This is reportedly the supreme headquarters of the angelic forces and the triune Godhead under whom they serve, according to these Christian sources. This description would coincide with the Nordic emblem of an upright 3-level triangle or pyramid, and that these humanoids would no doubt be aware of this divine center of angelic activity if our elite scientists are, and the fact that an inverted or upside-down 3-level triangle is associated with the Dulce base might denote a direct Luciferian connection. This is especially interesting if the reports are true which state that the Dulce base has its counterparts within the 4th and 5th densities or dimensions of that particular point in time-space. Branton, she decided to drive through Dulce looking for something suspicious, but found nothing. She went back to Durango and drove to Cortez. She fell in love with it, and moved to Colorado. Early in December of that year, Tom paid Ann a surprise visit. He told her that he had walked out on his job some months ago after a major dispute broke out between security workers and a military group. Tom said that the security force used flash guns, but the military group was armed with machine guns. Although an apparent human/alien security force may have possessed flash guns and the military force machine guns, this does not necessarily mean that a weapons dispute was the sole trigger of the conflict. Branton. He said it was like a war with screaming and panic in all the tunnels. A lot of people died in the conflict. He wondered what story the government would use to cover up the deaths. In February 1980, the media reported a prison riot near Los Alamos and that many prisoners died. Was this the cover-up? Tom admitted that he was in trouble. He went back to the base and took photos, papers, and other items. He had entered and left through a ventilation shaft inside an ice cave. After leaving the cave, he returned to a prepared box, put everything in the box, and buried it. He went back to his car, but security was waiting for him. They questioned him about his purpose for being there, but allowed him to leave. He was on his way to Colorado Springs, and now he was on the run. He asked Ann to have faith in him and that he was still the same man she had always known as a friend. The next day, after he had left, 3 men from I showed up and questioned Ann about Tom's whereabouts. On 4 other visits in December, other men questioned her and she told them she knew nothing about where he had gone. In January, the CIA came to her door. They insisted that she was withholding information. Ann had been in a car accident in 1978 and had recurring headaches. In January 1980, she checked into a hospital in Farmington, New Mexico. She went in for an angiogram, but woke up to find that she had had a stroke. She had to relearn everything again. At that time the OC and CIA stopped bothering her. It was June of 1982 before she heard from Thomas again. He called from her dad's house. They talked for hours. He had been running for his life and had been in 20 states and 4 countries. He showed her medical papers and scientific diagrams, but Ann could not make sense of it all. Tom told her that the government had a treaty with an alien nation and that aliens had been under this earth for countless centuries. He showed Ann pages of alien written material and translated papers. It was horrifying. He told her that Kathy and Eric had been kidnapped and were being held captive in a subterranean base. He needed a safe place to hide all the original papers that he took from the Dulce base and other things of a substantial nature to prove the alien conspiracy. Tom and Ann buried the box of material on a mountain. Years have changed the terrain, and Ann has not been able to relocate the exact burial site. Sound like a tall tale? Many think it is. Ann had photos of Thomas and details of his life in her files. Tom met with him once. He is a real person. He answered some of my questions by mail. He fully believes what he says and has answered the questions when he knows the answers. Some of this information has been published in hopes of eliciting further witness testimony. So far, I only know of 3 others who claim they have been to this underground facility. One man is known to a friend of mine and was trained as a nuclear physicist. The Dulce facility is a 7-level underground research base, run by the DOE Department of Energy, as is the Nevada test site, Branton, and connected to the Los Alamos labs. Level I has garages, street maintenance equipment, photo labs, hydroponic gardens to grow fresh vegetables, fruits, legumes, etc., human housing, a mess hall, VIP housing, a kitchen, and a security vehicles garage. Each of the levels has color-coded electric cars that are used for short-distance transport. Level 6 houses the infamous Nightmare Hall, a security arsenal, a military arsenal, military security, and a generator/impulsor. The generator is 200 feet in diameter, and has a 2-level electromagnetic impulse device that can create a perfect clone, duplicate or replicate of a person. Science fiction? Abductees have described being taken to similar facilities. There is no proof unless someone can find the box. If it is there, or unless one succeeds in discovering one of the entrances to the base, although there would no doubt be risks if one were to attempt entrance to the base without full-scale military backup. Branton. However, these stories have prompted researchers, including myself, to find documented evidence of underground facilities, and we have found plenty. That such an underground empire exists in almost total secrecy is absolutely amazing. Few question its existence, its purpose, or the tremendous expenditure of monies that must have gone into the design, construction, maintenance, and operations of these facilities. Chapter 29. They live, chameleons in our midst. John A. Keel, in his book Our Haunted Planet, gives an interesting introduction to the reality of an alien race that has taken careful measures to remain hidden from the mass consciousness of those dwelling on the surface of planet Earth, or those ignorant human cattle whom they are intent on manipulating and exploiting from their secret hiding places above, below and even amongst the inhabitants of planet Earth. The parahuman serpent people of the past are still among us. They were probably worshipped by the builders of Stonehenge and the forgotten ridge-making cultures of South America. In some parts of the world the serpent people successfully posed as gods and imitated the techniques of the superintelligence god. This led to the formation of pagan religions centered around human sacrifices. The conflict, so far as man himself was concerned, became one of religions and races. Whole civilizations based upon the worship of these false gods rose and fell in Asia, Africa, and South America. The battleground had been chosen, and the mode of conflict had been decided upon. The human race would supply the puns. The mode of control was complicated as usual. Human beings were largely free of direct control. Each individual had to consciously commit himself to one of the opposing forces. The main battle was for what was to become known as the human soul. Once an individual had committed himself, he opened the door so that an indefinable something could actually enter his body and exercise some control over his subconscious mind. The serpent people or Omega group attacked man in various ways, trying to rid the planet of him. But the superintelligence was still able to look over man. God worked out new ways of communication and control, always in conflict with the serpent people. In relation to these serpent people, who some claim are now living among us and have been doing so for a very long time, the anonymous intelligence officer and planetary patriot Commander X released details of an incident which may well have come right out of a John Carpenter movie, if not for the fact that the commander himself, from his own high security position within the intelligence community, is convinced of its potential reality. Another story comes from a private station on the surface at Dulce. He soon realized something mighty odd was going on around there, but it took a while to put his finger on it. One morning last September, I was working on a routine job when another of the young enlistees, a mechanic, came in with a small rush job he wanted welded at once. He had the print and proceeded to show me exactly what he wanted. We are both bending over the bench in front of the welder when I happened to look directly into his face. It seemed to suddenly become covered with a semi-transparent film or cloud. His features faded and in their place appeared a thing with bulging eyes, no hair and scales for skin. I stood and looked at it for about 20 seconds. Whatever it was stood and looked at me without moving. Then the strange face seemed to fade away, and at the same time recede into the ordinary face of the young man underneath. The dissipation of the imposed face lasted or took about 5 seconds before it was completely gone and I was standing there weak, my mouth open and staring at the young man who had come in with the rush order. The young man did not seem to be conscious of the elapsed time when I had observed all this but went right on talking about the job as if nothing had happened. Another related report here. This is hard to take but I assure you it was still harder for me. No one can realize the jolt you could get from seeing anything like this until they have experienced it for themselves. It was several days before I had myself convinced that maybe after all what I had seen was real and that I was not suffering from illusions and the beginning of insanity. Days passed before I saw this particular phenomena again. The next time was later at night at the guardhouse near the front gate, on the way to work. I had purchased some small items and on arriving I went around to the guardhouse with my slip to retrieve my package. There was only one guard on duty. I handed him the check and he began to look at the package, taking his time. I waited a minute, then happened to look directly at him again. His face began to change. Again the face of a strange creature was imposed. You could see through the imposed face for a few seconds and then it became the only one visible, solidified as the word, and again about 20 seconds duration. Again 5 seconds for dissipation and the guard started to move normally again. found my package and gravely handed it to me, and I walked out without a word being said. Since coming across this report from the commander, I made an effort to see if there were any other similar accounts that might confirm the existence of chameleons or alien infiltrators working on the surface of planet Earth in an apparent attempt to pass themselves off as human beings and blend in with our society, for whatever nefarious agenda they might be serving. Some of the reports of quasi-human infiltrators spoke of the men in black who have terrorized UFO witnesses. Although many of the MIB who have been reported were obviously humans working for some obscure surface, other planetary or subterranean intelligence agency, as well as others that appeared to be either cyborgs, clones, or even paraphysical manifestations, there was a branch of the so-called MIB which betrayed definite reptilian characteristics. These in essence were reptilian humanoids with a full-blown, although at times not too convincing, reconstructive surgery job, apparently intended to allow them to operate in human society undetected. Some of the early infiltrators betrayed themselves with their plastic or artificial appearance, whereas in more recent years the disguise has become far more sophisticated with the advent of molecular shape-shifting occult technology, techno-hypnotic transmitters, and portable laser hologram technology, according to one source, and therefore harder to detect. However, there are ways. Researcher George Andrews, in his book Extraterrestrial Friends and Foes, Illuminate Press. P.O. Box 2808. Lilburn, Georgia 30226, quotes a statement made by Valdemar Valerian, director of Leading Edge Research. A friend of mine and 4 of his friends experimented with crystalline structures a year or 2 ago, mid-1980s, Branton, and they figured out how to cut them along certain planes so they could actually see the aura or energy field around people. That's when they discovered that people aren't people, or the people they thought they were. It appears that some ET humanoids have a dark blue ovoid aura. Note, aura cameras developed by Chuck Schrammick, yes, the same Chuck Schrammick of the Hale-Bopp companion controversy, and others clearly show the 7 multicolored chakra points of the human soul/spirit matrix. Presumably, since reptilians have no soul, they would have no multicolored auric field. Branton. It so happens that all the people they checked that met this criteria also wore dark glasses and made every attempt to act like they really wanted nothing to do with people in general. They followed one of these people out into the desert where he evidently had a trailer. After waiting until dusk, they made a pretense of needing help and knocked on the door. After a short while, the light went on and the man came to the door. He looked normal, except that his pupils were vertical slits instead of circles. It works. The only trouble is that it costs $2,000 to put a pair of those glasses together. Several areas across the western United States where surface and door underground military installations exist have reportedly produced similar chameleon sightings. There seems to be a trend which involves the infiltration of the NSA, CIA, and the subsequent replacement of agency personnel, and in turn military-industrial personnel, by alien life forms not loyal to planet Earth nor to the human race in general. These reports are very similar to other reports that made the rounds within fringe research groups during the early 1980s concerning the reported assimilation of high-ranking communist officials and scientists by serpent-like humanoids, reptilian beings that were reputedly revived out of suspended animation from a frozen city that was discovered under the northern Siberian ice fields. There was referred to as the Siberian Affair. Are there really TARs living among the wheat, as all these reports suggest? Aside from Dulce, New Mexico, and the Nevada test site, other areas where these chameleon sightings have taken place include Deep Springs, California, where these alien imposters have allegedly been sighted, and Dugway, Utah, where one woman by the name of Barbara, who worked as a hairstylist, claimed she saw one of the high-ranking military officials transform temporarily into an entity with reptilian features. Another source at Dugway, who worked in an auto shop, claimed that he saw a similar phenomena while changing the tires on the car of one Dugway military official. Remember that Dugway works closely with Area 51, which is just to the west and across the state border. It is interesting that there are claims that the joint CIA alien activity within the Dreamland underground complexes of Nevada have and are being extended to the underground facilities below the St. George and Dugway areas of Utah, among other sites. Another sighting of these imposters occurred just south of the midpoint of an old toll road that ran between Hopeland and Lakeport, California. The sighting involved large black automobiles that would leave and enter a dead-end road in the area. When investigated, the tire tracks ran right up and under a large boulder at the base of a cliff and seemingly disappeared beneath it, and since the road was fenced on one side and a steep hill existed on the other, it is unlikely that the large automobiles were able to turn around. This same area, especially one particular mountain there, is known as a very unusual place. Bottomless caves with stone stairwells have been reported. Government vehicles and personnel have disappeared without a trace on the road. An atmosphere of fear is said to exist in an area approximately 30 miles in diameter. Also, there have been a lot of unexplained deaths among the settlers in the area. Apparently this area is the site of a large underground center of alien activity. This activity was taking place back in the 1930s, long before the so-called alien men in black started getting any major attention from ufologists in America. The Dulce Enigma and the chameleons have not only infiltrated Utah, Nevada and California, but seems to have stretched its tentacles all the way up to the Pacific Northwest. One area of particular interest is the Madigan Military Hospital south of Seattle, Washington near Fort Lewis, which has been investigated by Val Valerian. In June of 1992, Valerian released the following article, titled Alien Infiltration of the Military Medical System, Madigan Hospital in Washington, in his leading-edge newsletter. About a year ago, we ran into several people who stated that they had heard that reptilian humanoids were working at the United States Army Hospital near Fort Lewis, Washington. At that point, these statements were simply filed away in rumor status, pending the arrival of something more substantial. Descriptions of the nature of an appearance of alien humanoid forms that could be termed reptilian vary widely. Reptilian humanoids have been described in Italy as looking very lizard-like, even with tails. Pictures showing some of these entities were published in an Italian magazine and eventually ended up in the United States in the leading edge. Logic would seem to tell us that if alien humanoids were in fact in collusion with military medical personnel at a hospital, they would not in fact have the appearance of anything other than humans, or be close enough to humans to blend in. About a month ago, the nature of synchronicity brought me to an espresso bar, where I chanced to engage a lady in her early 50s in some small conversation about an entirely unrelated matter. She had been a nurse for some 20 years, and 16 of those 20 years had been spent working for the United States Army. She retired from the service and was now job hunting in the local area. She was very professional, and seemed to know a lot about the nursing field. Gradually, her conversation got around to a very unusual place, Madigan Military Hospital, which is located on Route 5 south of Seattle. She had applied for work at the hospital and noticed that it was indeed a hospital unlike any she had ever seen before. Madigan is a brand new $150 million facility, built about a year or so ago. From her description, there are small R2-D2 type robots that shuttle prescriptions between floors. All the equipment is prototype one of a kind, like laser X-rays and a lot of equipment that was extremely high-tech. It was not this alone which piqued my interest, but a comment she made later. She made the statement that when she entered a specific lab in the hospital, she noticed that all the personnel were extremely absorbed in their work, nothing too uncommon about that. But then she stated that she had the thought that some of the equipment looked quite alien, and two men WHO looked exactly alike turned and looked at her in response to her thought. She said that the eyes of these two men were quite penetrating and that they both moved in unison. That got my interest. She then stated that during the tour of the facility, the individual who was escorting her said that the top floor of the hospital and two of the sub-basement floors were top secret R&D areas and were off-limits to both military and civilian personnel. That really got my attention. Subsequently, I ran into a cable repairman who was installing cable TV in a nearby town, and decided on the hunch to mention to him about the strange nature of Madigan. The hunch paid off. He said he had been involved in the installation of fiber optic networks between the floors of the hospital when it was in its construction stage, and that there was a 3-foot space in between the floors where the optics ran. Since these observations were the result of the nurse's preliminary interview, I talked to her about the idea of getting more information, since she would be going back at least one more time. She agreed to make some tapes of her observations. The transcript of these tapes is as follows. Visit to Madigan Hospital. The entrance to Madigan Hospital is off of Interstate 5 past Olympia, Washington. The exit is marked as Madigan Hospital, Camp Murray exit. As you enter the area, the hospital sits to the right, a massive white structure. As you enter the parking lot, there is a pond and sunken area that runs through a bridge which connects the medical mall area to a 3-story building that serves as the main core of the hospital, where the services like X-ray, nuclear medicine and other services are performed. The 3-story complex is connected to an 8-story tower dubbed the nursing tower. The tower has a floor that is closed off, and I could find no access to it. I entered the front of the hospital, and the lobby was very typical, but not typical of a hospital of this size. I then went to the information desk and was greeted by an Oriental specialist 4th class, who was seated. He seemed very low-key and laid back. I was directed to human resources. As I walked through the corridors, I noticed how beautiful and calm I was beginning to feel. The colors are very soft and conducive to feeling mellow, a tranquilized atmosphere designed to negate any apprehensions. Branton. The military personnel were very slow-moving, which has not been my experience in the past, having served 5 years as an army nurse, and low-key. I went to the human resources and asked about an application, and was directed to a master sergeant, director of personnel. Having been a medical technologist for the better part of 25 years, the equipment I saw at the hospital was far beyond anything I have ever seen. I was shown an area where there was a long room with computer banks on both sides, where both civilian and military personnel were working. Before entering the room, I was asked to stand in front of the door, where I was scanned by some beam-like light. I was told that my thermal pattern was being recorded in order to permit my entry to the room. Out this room was another room where procedures were conducted on patients, and I noticed that a patient walked over and climbed on an exam table. The procedure they were doing always requires that the patient must be sedated. However, I noticed that the physician leaned over the patient and touched the patient in the center of the forehead with his index and middle finger of one hand. Immediately, the patient fell into a state of sedation and the procedure was started. What kind of doctor can touch a patient in that way and sedate him? I looked around at the other personnel in the room at this time. There were 2, a private 1st class and a specialist 4th class at opposite ends of the room from where I was standing. Both of these men were the same size, had the same skin color, and moved in a very deliberate manner. I was talking with the sergeant and happened to say something to myself very softly while having the thought how strange these people seemed. Both other men turned and looked at me almost as if to stare at me. I got this strange feeling. I had heard before from a friend whose brother had made the uncharacteristic comment that aliens worked at Madigan. All the people in the room and the military personnel in general that I had seen in the hospital seemed to move very slowly, almost in slow motion. I left the area and went back to the sergeant's office. A month later, I returned to Madigan with a friend to see, without telling her anything of my experience, if she saw and felt the same things I did. She is very sensitive to variations in electromagnetic fields, and eventually had a headache and became nauseated. There are many other things about this place. Between the floors there are spaces where small robots move to deliver supplies to all the wards and other areas in the hospital, according to the sergeant. I was told that there is no reason for personnel to go into these areas, that the robots do all that. I did see one of the robot devices. It looked like the R2-D2 character on Star Wars. My friend and I entered through what is known as the Clinic Mall. This area houses the outpatient clinic. There were very few people there for such a large clinic. We were told that there are 3 floors beneath the hospital and 1 floor above that are off limits to all personnel, military and civilian, and that these areas were classified top secret and were research and development (R&D) areas. There are very unusual antennas on top of the hospital. The 3-story main service area has a complex on top of it that appears to have no entrance and no windows. Judging from the way the hospital is built, there are a lot of dead areas that comprise spaces that cannot be accessed from the main service area. The personal feeling we both got being in the hospital was that we started to feel very drained. And we both experienced getting a dull headache. It wasn't until we had driven several miles from the facility that we started to feel better. I came across yet another report suggesting that reptiloid entities were infiltrating our military-industrial complex. However, the exact source of this particular story was not confirmed and therefore should be taken as is. The report stated that sometime during the 1980s a secretary working in the Pentagon noticed a high-ranking Pentagon official who had apparently lost a contact lens. The eye from where the lens fell out was not human, but instead contained a vertically slit pupil. No one working at the Pentagon seemed to know where the official worked, although they had apparently assumed that he was supposed to be there in some capacity or another. The secretary, however, informed her superiors of the strange incident, and immediately security personnel approached the officer, who apparently was not aware of his missing contact lens. The man did not make any major attempts to resist. When the apartment of this official was searched, copies of several sensitive documents on the Star Wars or Strategic Defense Initiative program were discovered. Apparently the entity had been stealing the documents and transmitting their contents to some point beyond the planet. Rumor had it that the entity was physically examined and it was discovered that its internal organs were not human. In reference to the draconian interest in our planetary defense net, I pass on the following information from British ufologist Timothy Good, who described the unfortunate fate of several experts who assisted in the development of the Star Wars defense system. Apparently, they were either eliminated by those they worked for so that they would not reveal what they knew, or someone or something else that was not pleased with the ultimate products of their efforts was responsible for their tragic deaths. Certainly, all of these scientists dying at once cannot be explained in coincidental terms, whatever the case. Reports of suspicious deaths, darkly and deeply linked to UFOs, persist, however, and continue to cause speculation. Word comes from Gordon Creighton, editor of the informative Flying Saucer Review, who notes a possible deathly tie-in with the United States Star Wars program. He wrote to me in November 1988 as follows. Here in Britain 22 scientists have reportedly either taken their own lives or died in very strange or mysterious circumstances. And it seems that most were engaged in British work on behalf of, or related to the United States Star Wars program. The British government, it seems, was trying to hush it up. But press statements here say that the United States government had put our government on the spot and demanded a full inquiry. So, quite clearly, it is either the Russians or them. As many researchers have surmised, Star Wars, ostensibly conceived as a defensive system against Russian missile attack, may have had from its beginning a defensive UFO connection. Whatever the case, a mock test in September 1988 of an earth-shattering warhead, much like Star Wars in reverse, was conducted at the Tonopah Test Range in Nevada. Announced as a proposed superweapon designed to destroy Russian underground command centers dug in solid rock down to 1,000 feet. Some UFO analysts believe that the real target is not Russian but another adversary deep down in cavernous installations in Nevada and New Mexico. Hopefully this weapon will only be used against those underground bases where no human captive presence exists. In those bases where humans captives are present, which is probably the reality in the greater majority of the bases, a full-scale ground assault should be considered instead. Branton, according to the Pentagon, the proposed Earth-penetrating warhead is urgently needed. According to rumor mills, an alien race, the Greys, in their fortified underground laboratories, are genetically experimenting with the human race. Even more ominous, rumors say that their intransigence today may lead to new perils tomorrow. In reference to the chameleons and certain elements of the so-called men in black phenomena, I cannot help but include the following account from Brazil, which apparently puts everything in perspective. The following excerpts were taken from a report by Brazilian researcher Antonio Hunius, titled, The Tupas, UFO Horror Stories from Brazil. Mr. Hunius describes the following incident that was investigated by Apex, Association of Extraterrestrial Investigations, in São Paulo, one of the best-known UFO groups in Brazil, founded by Dr. Max Berezowski. The affair began near Vitória, the capital of the state of Espírito Santo north of Rio State, where there are beaches rich in mineral contents. It happened either in late 1979 or early 1980, Osni Schwartz wasn't sure, when he told the story in 1986. A youngster called Aramar sold beverages at the beach, where one day he encountered 3 men dressed with suits and tie, highly unusual clothing for the beach, especially in Brazil, who approached him and said they wanted to talk to him. Aramar became scared, thinking they were perhaps policemen who wanted to implicate him in a drug case, so he avoided the beach for a few days. As he returned home after dropping off his girlfriend one night, he saw a car with the same 3 men inside. He ran to the house, but suddenly he couldn't hear well. His mother took him to the hospital where he was not cured, although about a month later he suddenly could hear well again. Aramar moved to Rio, finding work at a bakery in a shift between 4 and 11 p.m. One night, as he was crossing one of the many tunnels that linked the Rio bays, he saw 2 of the MIBs walking in his direction. The youngster ran in the opposite direction, only to find the 3rd MIB waiting at a bus stop. He escaped and went back to the bakery, where he told his boss that the Vitória police were chasing him. The boss accompanied him to the nearest police station to make a complaint, which he did, but he was not believed. The boss then convinced him that he should perhaps move to São Paulo, a bigger city where it may be easier to go unnoticed. So Ramar moved to Sao Paulo, finding work in an electrical company and sharing a room with another man. He also became friends with a vendor of beverages from Vitória who had a stand near a movie theater. While hanging out there one night, a car stopped right in front of the stand and the door opened. Even though he didn't want to go, Ramar lost his will and entered the car. The door closed and he found inside, not surprisingly, the three same men whom he had been dodging for months. They drove for a while, leaving the city and entering a wooded area. The car stopped and they all walked up to a big UFO surrounded by some sort of luminous ring and hovering above the ground. The men walked underneath the craft, which emitted a ray of light, and they suddenly were inside. Still drained of any willpower, Ramar walked to a chair and sat down. From the arms of the chair appeared handles that secured his wrists. An iron bar then pressed his forehead backwards while another gadget fastened his neck. Up to here the men were always dressed with suits, but at this point an incredible transformation took place. The MIB's head ripped open into a heart shape and the skin became green and scaled like a reptilian. Take into account that while the popular image of the MIB was well known 14 years ago, the idea of reptilian abductors was then not in vogue as nowadays. Be that as it may, the UFOnauts proceeded to interrogate and tell him things that were going to happen both to him and the Earth. To make the story even more Hollywood-esque, a door in the room opened at one point and Ramar was able to peek at human corpses hanging by their feet from hooks. The man naturally became traumatized, remembering only that his straps were loosened. Everything went blank after that. Ramar's conscious recollection places him next back at the theater, but several hours later since there was no traffic in the streets. He returned to his room in panic and began to tell the story to his roommate. A strange force pushed his body, however, throwing it against the wall in front of him, as he remembered the aliens had told him that he shouldn't speak about the experience or he would suffer. Ramar cried for a while, not knowing what to do. A few days later, his friend contacted the Globo TV network, which was working on a UFO documentary. Globo, in turn, passed the tip to Dr. Max Berezowski. Ramar and his roommate went to Apex on a very busy day when the office was full of people. They told the whole story to Dr. Berezowski and a few assistants, Osni Schwartz among them. Berezowski attempted to do hypnotic regression with a witness, but there was too much interference in the office and Ramar was in total panic. He was saying that they were going to take him on the next Thursday and that a UFO was going to land in a Sao Paulo neighborhood on Tuesday night. A crowd of people, in fact, went that night to the supposed landing site but nothing happened. Although Dr. Berezowski was in touch with Ramar, he vanished a few days later and nobody ever saw him again. I wrote down at the end of my notes on this affair, the whole case is like a UFO horror movie. Chapter 30. The Abduction and Manipulation of Humans Using Advanced Technology. By Valdemar Valerian. Excerpted from Matrix 2. From The Dulce Book by Branton. Introduction. In July 1947, the radar at the Four Corners area in the southwestern United States affected and took down an alien disk. It was entirely by accident. As a result of the electromagnetic beams, upon which the radar system was based, interfering with the systems of the craft. Branton. The disk landed near Roswell, New Mexico. It was to be the first of two disks that would crash in that area. On board, scientists and military personnel found several dead aliens beings. And immediate analysis of their species could not be determined, but the aliens referred to as the Aben had both reptilian and insect-like qualities. Also on board were found the remains of several military personnel. As far as we knew, this was the first major indication that human beings were being taken by an alien species. In December 1988, former Navy intelligence officer William Cooper interviewed a man who said, "I don't know everything, but it's way out of our control. To tell you the truth, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. Giant underground shelters are being built under Groom Lake and other places." In reference to the claim by some that these aliens are harvesting humans on planet Earth for their genetic, bioplasmic and secretional properties, Valerian states, there is no doubt that the government policy of secrecy makes the harvest easier for the Greys. Governments, by definition, are supposed to protect the public welfare. Obviously, something went very wrong here, and it appears that the Nazi SS intelligence-based CIA had a lot to do with it. Note, the CIA was reputedly established by Bavarian Illuminati representative Alan Dulce in collaboration with Bavarian Thule Society representative Nazi SS General Reinhard Gehlen. The CIA/NSA, working on behalf of the corporate socialists in America who, according to Anthony Sutton and other economists, financed the Bolshevik and Nazi revolutions, in turn infiltrated the industrial military system and in turn the largely unelected/appointed executive branch of the United States government via their coup d'etat of the executive branch, which occurred simultaneously with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Since Kennedy's death, most if not all of the United States presidents have been members of global financial organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderbergers. All of which do not honor Americans' Declaration of Independence, but instead advocate a New World Order to be implemented with the assistance of a United Nations military force. Brenton, these malevolent aliens have allied themselves with the secret world government whose thirst for power and system survival is probably only unequaled by the malevolent aliens themselves. The malevolent aliens have given advanced technology to the government, manipulated, lied to, deceived, and generally used our secret government for their selfish and inhumane alien ends. An alien base in Nevada. The continuing situation with regard to MP, a 20-year-old woman in Las Vegas, has brought many interesting factors to the fore. Her first abduction occurred when she was 5 years old in December 1975. She has experienced over 400 abductions since that time, an average of 2 a month. Around 1987, she found that she was able to retain more and more memory of the activities. She is also an excellent artist with a photographic memory. There is sufficient evidence that she has been on various craft, and she has also been taken to underground facilities in the mountains in Arizona and under the desert near Paradox, Nevada. The Nevada facility is located near the Paradox area. She was also brought to this facility in 1987. The facility is not as large as the one in Arizona. Riken programming devices were used on her in attempts at programming. The facility is generally described as one oriented toward genetic work. Large cylinders containing amber, pink, and light blue fluids were noted. These cylinders appear to be similar to those detailed in Matrix 2. All cylinders contained humanoid forms. The cylinders containing light blue fluid contained forms that look human. The others contained hybrid/genetic variant humanoids. The last time she was brought to this facility was on January 22, 1991, where they attempted to get her to agree to not revealing data, as the Syrians were aware of her detailed interaction with us. She refused. The Syrians said something to the extent that she was affecting the balance in the Confederation. If that is so, then we were certainly all for it. Note, these are probably humanoids from Sirius B, who have formerly collaborated with the reptiloids/Greys of Draconis Orion. Although many Syrians continue to collaborate with the Orionite forces who have commandeered their collective, other Syrians seem to have been experiencing a major conversion to the Andromedan Pleiadian Federation's non-interventionist policies, now that many of their former treaties with the reptiloids/Greys are falling apart because of betrayals on the reptilian side. A huge armada from Sirius B is supposed to arrive in the Sol system around 2004 to engage the Orion Draconian forces, which have since taken full control of many of the Syrians' former joint operational bases throughout this system. As with the Nazi element on Earth, there are apparently agents from Sirius B who still wish to maintain collaboration with the reptiloids. If not for the fact that they are operating under near total mind control, then for the fact that they see a joint effort between the elite power cults of Sirius, Bavaria and Orion as the only means to carry out their totalitarian plans for planet Earth on behalf of their supposed astral ascended master leaders, especially in the face of Federation opposition. This may be what was meant in regards to the balance in the Confederation. Branton. Upon her return she discovered that she had some pain on the right side of her abdomen. At this facility, she saw Syrians, Greys, and in another part of the facility she saw what appeared to be the United States military members. There were other beings there that she described as light beings. Light does not always make right, Branton. Her description of them was that they had a humanoid form, but there were no details in the form, it just emitted a light. In view of the current state of knowledge, it is thought that these were beings of at least fifth density. The beings hovered around and monitored the Syrians and Greys all during her stay at the facility. The human military at the facility wore black uniforms. Information on the Greys * the United States executive branch, not the congressional branch of government, made one or more agreements with a species described as the Tall Greys, and has agreed not to interfere with alien operational plans and trade for technology. Agreements made in 1934, 1954, 1964, and 1972. The Grey clones are performing biological work which necessitates the termination of various species on the surface of the Earth, which is not governed or protected under the treaty made with the United States government. Underground installations are the only sovereign areas under the treaty. Researchers will recall that the disk that crashed in 1947 at Roswell, New Mexico had several reptilian species on board, as well as the body parts and clothing of several Army Air Force officers. Species objectives appear to be founded on a rigid domination survival-based social order, where their religion is science, their social structure is geared to obedience and duty, their military concepts are grouped around conquest, colonization, and domination through covert mind control programs. Their basic game appears to be to use nullification and domination to control the leaders of various targeted civilizations. They accomplish this by taking out the leaders and replacing them with entities they can control. The function of the elite humans, as far as the Greys are concerned, are to decimate portions of the human population so that the remainder can be easily controlled. Hitler is a prime example. Apparent social structure. One byproduct of their social memory complex is that any kind of decision takes a while to make, since none of the Grey clones seem to have the innate ability to act independently of the other clone species. This social structure has no room for surprises, and the best laid plans of mice and men can be totally wrecked if it comes into contact with anything outside its operational context. The tall Greys seem to be less prone to the frailties of the system than do the smaller Greys. Grey strategies and operations. The Earth is somewhat unique in that it is a broad spectrum of beings of several density levels and race types. It is inhabited inside, outside, and in the atmosphere in thousands of hidden little pockets and time stream projections. The process of conquering a planet involves the location of beings that vibrate in resonance with their vibrational frequency. These located beings are then told that they are the elite or chosen ones who will conquer and lead the human race and rule the world for their Grey masters. Often the located beings are physically taken aboard craft and given physical examinations, provided with implants, given accelerated data through inculcation methods that will help them serve the Greys. The function of an elite is to decimate portions of its own race in an effort to reduce populations to manageable limits so the remainder can be easily controlled. The Nazi Jew scenario is a good example of the Grey modus operandi. They also controlled the Japanese Empire and are generally responsible for most aggression between human groupings on the planet. The Greys use divide and conquer tactics. Although it should be mentioned that since WWII and the cessation of the alliance with Bavaria, the Japanese have been interacting more and more with the Coldasians, a relatively benevolent humanoid race that reportedly inhabits the alternate antimatter universe, and who apparently maintain close ties with the Andropleiadine Federation. Branton. Humans have generally been deceived into playing victim games of negativity, self-limitation, self-denigration and destruction. The games that the Greys are trying to enforce are games of coercion and secrets, as well as hidden standards. All activities are conducted on a playing field which is limited by the attention span and the scope of awareness of the players. Grey military operations include colonization of unprotected civilizations which are unaligned with any other group in space. They use planets for supply depots, slave sources, and biological materials. The exercise of domination and the enslavement of planetary populations is expressed as service to self as opposed to service to others. It creates power for their group, but inherent in this process is a rapid dissipation of power in that civilization, due to the limitations imposed by the games of limitation and negativity enforced on the popularity. According to what research has revealed, there are certain methods and plans that have underscored the literal invasion of Earth by various Orion-based species. Typical scenarios might be, the target planet is timetabled for invasion. The base station is moved within range. Disguised as asteroids, planetoids, or comets but recognized as alien craft by minor course alterations that can and have been detected, for instance in regards to the asteroid Geographos, Phobos, Hale-Bopp, etc. Branton. Leaders are approached with population control programs or solutions to survival-related problems. Leaders are convinced that they represent an elite group that has been chosen by God to rule the populace for the good of God's empire. In many cases, however, the elite do not believe in any God other than themselves. Branton. Look at any theocratic or religiocratic country on Earth and you can see this. Apparent reasons for Orion-based operations, In accordance with service to self philosophy, goals are sought that will achieve more power for the elite or ruling class. It is important that more and more slaves be made, so that the psychic energy can be drawn off to feed the madness of the power elite. Domination and nullification is the basis of the game of struggle and conquest. It is a stable datum to negative Orion-based groups that empires can only be built and maintained on the backs of broken game pieces, and oiled by the blood, sweat, and tears of worthless entities too decayed to be useful for any other tasks and too rebellious to trust in more cooperative ventures. Primary physical characteristics of the Greys. The larger Greys apparently have some vestigial reproductive capability, and some of the hybrid species that have been crossbreed with the taller reptilian species have full reproductive capability. The brain capacity is estimated to be between 2,500 and 3,500 cc, compared to 1,300 cc for the average human. Due to the cloning process, the neural matter is artificially grown brain matter, and the Greys have known technology that enables them to insert memory patterns and consciousness into clones in any manner or pattern that they wish. The Greys consume nourishment through a process of absorption through their skin. The process, according to abductees who have witnessed it, involved spreading a biological slurry mixture that has been mixed with hydrogen peroxide which oxygenates the slurry and eliminates bacteria onto their skin. Waste products are then excreted back through the skin. Many abductees have noted that the Greys have a distinct series of odors. The larger Greys have a more pronounced nose. According to some government sources, these extraterrestrial biological entities called themselves the Ebon. It is with the larger Greys that elements of the government made a series of diplomatic agreements in the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Note, other sources say that the agreements made between the Scottish Rite faction of government date back at least to 1933 to 34 and possibly earlier in regards to the native subterranean reptilian species. The large Greys are apparently crossbreeds between the tall, lizard-like saurian bipeds and the smaller, Grey-type saurian bipeds. Although the treaty was initiated with the tall Greys, the very fact that a reptilian hierarchy exists, small Greys working for taller reptiloids, explains why the shorter Greys have also been seen working with government officials. Branton. Reproduction processes of the Greys. Innumerable witnesses have confirmed the presence of underground facilities that the Greys use for breeding. These facilities, of which Dulce is the most famous, provide for genetic work of all descriptions. Humans are brought to these facilities on a continuing basis in order to provide a genetic pool from which to extract DNA and mixtures that will contribute toward the efforts of the Grey species to strengthen their genetic structure. Biological materials and animal mutilations. In some cases, humans are killed and tossed into the vats, the slurry mixture mentioned above. In 2 cases, dead humans have been seen floating in vats right next to the body parts of cattle. Human mutilations appear to be less obvious than cattle mutilations, although both still continue to this day. According to Don Ecker, the Justice Department is making a concerted effort to keep the human mutilations out of the media. Branton. Researcher beaten up by MIT/CIA, May 1990. Researcher Jefferson Sousa, Vegan, Homo contactee, arrived at a UFO conference in May of 1990 bearing information that included data about which corporations were producing helicopters with gravity assist, as well as information about their use in cattle mutilations. 4 men appearing like classical men in black, took the documents, and threw him back on a plane to New York. It may well be that CIA/Delta/NRO involvement in the mutilations might be more significant than supposed. One report has stated that in the Forest City of Los Alamos, New Mexico, witnesses have observed nightly caravans of cattle trucks entering a particular mountainous area known for its unusual and alien Amerindian pictographs. These caravans reportedly arrive following or preceding overflights of dozens of UFOs. When the cattle caravans left the area, they were reportedly empty. Is the government trying to appease the huge nest of Greys that reportedly operate below the Los Alamos region? This sounds hauntingly familiar to the ancient legend of St. George, who delivered the inhabitants of Cyllene, Libya from a fierce dragon who was in the habit of terrorizing the city. The king of Cyllene ordered the residents to offer their sheep and cattle to the beast in order to appease it. After all the livestock were depleted, the king ordered the inhabitants to draw lots, and he or she on whom the lot fell would be that day's sacrifice to appease the monster. One day the king's own daughter drew the lot, and with great anguish he allowed the guards to take her to the post outside the city. When the dragon approached to take his prey, a white horse with a silver-clad knight quickly approached. He brandished a sword and a long spear, as well as a shield with a red cross emblazoned on a white background. The Christian knight made quick work of the beast before the worm knew what had hit him, and delivered the city from this reptilian scourge. Whether the story is true or allegory, the message is clear. Eventually the time comes when one must cease from trying to appease the enemy, and by the grace of God Almighty go forth and destroy it. Branton. Now the question remains as to why the government would be carrying out or participating in this large-scale cattle mutilation program. Whose interests are being served? Breeding facilities under Dulce. Pictures in the Dulce labs portraying wombs with little fetuses and the clear tubs with little aliens in them are believed to portray the cloned worker class of beings that are pictured on the cover of Communion. The tall greys are the dominant species and are basically test tube species. The clones are synthetically produced with biological materials, much of which owe their source to life forms on Earth. The brain of the greys has been described as having many more lobes than the human brain. There have been previous references to crystalline networks that have been found in the brains of some of the alien autopsies. It is believed that the network has a functional relationship to telepathic communication and acts as a function in what is essentially a hive mind. Each of the grey clones has an individuality, but it is much less pronounced than in the human, where tendencies toward expanded awareness and shared consciousness are minimized through cultural conditioning, programming, and basic cranial differences in structure.